She made her falling.
Those are beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, Mayor, we are ready to start the meeting. We are just, due to technical difficulties with town hall streams, we'll actually be broadcasting to YouTube through Zoom. So it'll be a little bit of a different format, but still plan B when it works out.
Welcome everyone to the City of San Fernando City Council as successor agency to the San Fernando Redevelopment Agency regular meeting. It is June 7th at 6:19. Roll call, please.
Yes, Councilmember Rodriguez. Here. Councilmember Pacheco.
Here.
Councilmember Montanez. She is absent. Vice Mayor Mendoza. Present. Mayor Bowden.
Present, we do have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance led by our city clerk, Julie Fritz.
And we are hard and begin.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fritz. And at this time, the city attorney will give us a readout on the special session.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you,
Pardon
members.
me. We need to approval of the agenda, please. Approval of the agenda.
Okay, so we want to make sure that we're going to.
I'm sorry, there was a little bit of confusion because I guess the closed session was still its own separate special meeting. So we could either approve the agenda for the regular meeting, that's fine, or you can let me do the readout. It doesn't have to come in a particular order.
Okay.
It sounds kind of tinny. Is that okay? Or okay. So if I could just quickly do the readout for them, then we can close out the special meeting. So the City Council is now back in open session, having previously met in closed session under special meeting agenda dated June 7th, 2021, with the start time of 5 p.m. All members, excluding Councilmember Montanez, were present for the closed session proceedings. With respect to item A, a conference with labor negotiator, an update was provided by City Manager Kimball. Feedback given by the City Council, but no final action taken. With respect to item B, conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation, an update was provided by myself and Associate Michael Campion. Direction given by the City Council that no final action taken. With respect to item C, anticipated litigation, the City Council, by a vote of 3-1, Councilmember Mayor Gallen voting no, agreed to settlement terms as recommended by the city's third-party administrator for workers' comp, Adventure, for the settlement of claim number 21-153-105, involving a payment stream settlement of a cumulative value of $66,410 under workers' comp, as recommended by the workers' comp program. With respect to item D, public employee performance evaluation, update provided by the city manager and feedback also provided by the council. But again, no final action taken. And that concludes my report for the special meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Padilla. And at this time, I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda. However, I would like to do item 12 after item 9. And with that, is there a motion to approve? Is there a second?
One second.
There's a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Rodriguez. Yes. Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes.
Councilmember Montanez is absent. Vice Mayor Mendoza.
Yes.
Mayor Bowden.
Yes. And we have no presentations tonight. We have the form in order. Who's going to take care of that?
Okay, this is the decorum and order admonition stated in the City Council agenda. The City Council, elected by the public, must be free to discuss issues confronting the city and the orderly environment. Public members attending City Council meetings shall observe the same rules of order and decorum applicable to the City Council as set forth in the San Fernando procedural manual. Any person making impertinent, derogatory, or slanderous remarks becomes boisterous while addressing the City Council or while attending the City Council meeting. the providing officer so directs the sergeant of arms. Such person may be barred from further audience before the city council. I believe the Spanish interpretation of this admonition.
Yes, thank you. El Consejo Municipal, elegido por el público, debe tener la libertad de discutir los problemas que enfrenta la ciudad en un entorno ordenado. Los miembros del público que asistan a las reuniones del Consejo Municipal deberán observar las mismas reglas de orden y decoro aplicables al Consejo Municipal, según el Manual de Procedimientos de San Fernando. Cualquier persona que haga comentarios despectivos o difamatorios, impertinentes, o que se vuelva bulliciosa mientras se dirige al Consejo Municipal o mientras asiste a la reunión del Consejo Municipal, puede ser excluida de la sala si el presidente del Consejo así se lo indicara al sargento de armas, y dicha persona puede ser excluida de futuras audiencias ante el Consejo Municipal. Thank you.
City clerk, we can read public statements.
Yes, Madam Mayor. This is the time for public statements, which is limited to 3 minutes. Callers, please note in order to speak live, must close your YouTube stream of the city council meeting due to an approximate 8-second delay, and it will interfere with the live meeting streaming to YouTube. Again, please close the YouTube stream when calling in. Callers, when it is your turn to speak, you will be identified by announcing the last 4 digits of your telephone number. Thank you. And I believe there is one caller waiting to speak. Caller ID 5794.
Hello. This is Angel Zobel Rodriguez, 429 Griswold. Good evening, Mayor, council members, department chairs, and staff. On May 20th, the Education Commission awarded 12 students nearly $5,000 in scholarships. It was an honor to create an event that allowed a measure of in-person celebration for students who have spent an entire year at home and for their principals who haven't seen their kids in person in 14 months. We were the first commission shut down last March, and being together to congratulate these students means the world to us. To say this was a team effort puts it mildly. We wanted to thank the departments who dug in their closets and found city swag to help us create the college survival baskets we sent home with each student. Public Works and Recreation and Community provided some great items: jerseys, water bottles, reusable straws, and more. The USPS Federal Credit Union provided some fantastic school supplies as well. City partners at American Fruit and Flavor and Tesla sent additional items as well. We are truly grateful for the support of the great students of San Fernando. In addition, this event could not have happened without the support of the city team. The Public Works folks who got the commission banner perfectly straight with rope and strategically placed rebar. Julie Fernandez, thank you, and Marlon for the phenomenal photography, fantastic signage, and the physical labor we needed to create the first ever and hopefully last drive-through event. To the Deputy City Clerk, Crystal Solis, welcome to the team, and if there was ever truly a trial by fire, this was it. We thank you for your help and willingness to jump in your first week. The city manager probably got tired of the what about emails, but he never let on, and we thank you, Nick, for trusting us to push just far enough to honor these kids safely. And to our liaison, City Clerk Julia Fritz, we are truly grateful for your help navigating the ever-changing pandemic rules, shopping for basket items, and helping us take this from a dream this winter to a reality by spring. We also wanted to share our appreciation to the mayor and vice mayor, who arrived early and stayed until the last recipient jumped back in their vehicles to make a safe exit. Thank you again. Respectfully submitted, Angel Zobel Rodriguez, Education Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And we have no other.
We have no other comments.
I will close public comments, and now we're at consent calendar. Would anybody like to provide consent?
I said to pull 1, 4,
1, 4, and 5.
If I may, Madam Councilwoman, I think the request for item 1 is to bifurcate voting on minutes because the Councilwoman was not present for the June 1st meeting, so she would like to have a separate vote on that item, so you may vote. You will not vote.
Okay. So with that, let's vote on item number 1. Is there a motion? Motion to approve item number 1?
So I guess the motion would be first to approve the motion underway would be first to approve the May, do a vote on the May 3rd, 2021 minutes separately, and then the June 1st minutes.
May 3rd and June
1st.
Okay, Vice Versa, you make a motion to approve the May 3rd meeting? May 3rd, yes. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call please.
Councilmember Rodriguez? Yes. Councilmember Pacheco?
Yes.
Councilmember Montanez, absent. Vice Mayor Mendoza?
Yes.
Mayor Bell?
Yes. And now, is there a motion to approve the June 1st minutes? Make a motion to approve June 1st minutes. Is there a second? I will second it. Motion please, roll call please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Rodriguez? Councilmember Pacheco?
Yes.
Councilmember Montanez, absent. Vice Mayor Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Bell?
Motion passes. So we can make, we'll hold off on approving the entire consent calendar. The balance is consent calendar, and you asked for Councilmember Rodriguez to approve 4 and 5.
Yes, I just moving staff can give a short description of the work for the viewers.
Sure. For item 4, that's the annual investment policy. So part of the government code requires each city annually to review and approve an investment policy. That basically it's more of a baseline investment policy that lays out that the city's policy is to invest in very secure, short-term financing instruments. Basically, all of our financing, anything we invest in has to be AAA, has to be at least AA rated, I believe. Very strong financials, short-term. They can't exceed 5 years. And then there's also, we have a tenet of safety, liquidity, and yield. So basically, it's got to be a very safe investment. It has to be able to, if we need the funds quickly, we need to be able to liquidate it and sell it quickly. And then yield is the percent return. That is the third consideration. So that's what this policy outlines. It's the same policy as last year. There weren't any additions to it. Typically, there are only additions when something new in the government code comes out, requiring us to consider some other factor or increasing the safety issue. So that's basically what this policy is.
And approximately how much funds do we have invested?
I'm going to ask Diego, the Director of Finance. He is also our designated city treasurer, and he can give you a ballpark of how much we currently have invested.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. We've got approximately 30 million invested. We had about 13 million with one of our brokers, 1 million in another broker, 16.6 million in our lake account, and the remaining is what is left for the operations.
How does this policy, if at all, conflict with this new effort to secure a new investment fund to be able to earn more on our investment? And it might not. I guess I want to make sure that we're balancing like the narratives, right? So this is coming forward to say our policy, as with last year, is to protect our funds with safe investments, which I think is great. But our conversation, I believe it was last meeting, was almost our investment firms think it very safe, and we weren't making more than what a savings account makes. So I'm imagining we're still in line with these policies, but we want someone who takes more risks. And what's the change?
The change that I'm looking to make with investment policy is to bring something more fresh to the city. We've got accounts that have been with us for about 24 years. And I feel as city treasurer is another convenient. Our broker account, unfortunately, that's the way we did COVID. Our accounts has to be individual. Doesn't really have much insight into the city. While we are trying to stick with the policy, I also would like to see something more fresh, something more current, maybe a different policy into what council might bring. in line with the goals that were established earlier this year. So that's what the recommendation that.
I understand. Okay, thank you for explaining more about this and how that lines together. That was all my questions for that item.
Councilman Pacheco, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Vice Mayor, do you have any questions?
No questions.
And I have no questions. Would you like to make the motion? Oh, we're gonna wait just to. Okay. Item 5?
Thank you. Yeah, item 5 is the annual landscaping lighting assessment district. I'll give a very high overview, and then if there are more detailed questions, Matt can take it over from there. Basically, each year the city has an assessment district that was established back in the early 80s to pay for mostly the energy costs for streetlights in the city. And so each year we have to go through the process of projecting how much it's going to cost, and mostly in energy, but a little bit in staff and maintenance. Obviously, anytime one of the streetlights goes out, we have to go out and fix it. So that annual engineer's report is prepared that identifies all the costs for the assessment district, and then that is then distributed to each paying customer in the city. It typically shows up on your property tax bill. So that assessment for this coming year has actually been calculated, and there's a 3-step process. One is we have to award the contract to an engineering firm to make that, to prepare an engineer's report, which has to, the assessment needs to be based on an engineer's report. Second step, which is tonight, which is basically just approving the methodology for apportioning it to each residential customer that pays into this assessment district. There is a cap that was approved back in, when this assessment district was established, that you can't exceed that cap. That cap was established many years ago, so we're basically at that cap. Over the last few years, we had actually been exceeding that cap, so the general fund would actually subsidize to the tune of $20,000 to $40,000 a year to pay the full cost of streetlights. Actually, as part of the retirement incentive program, one of the employees, there were 2 employees that were mostly charged to this fund that did the streetlight maintenance. One of those employees retired, so that the effect of that was that there's less personnel costs in that dedicated to the assessment district. So we actually don't have any, there's not going to be any subsidy this year. We'll charge the cap, but that's it, and then that should cover the full cost of the district this year. So the item for you tonight is really just to approve the same methodology that's been used over the last several years, approve the engineer's report, and then I believe in July 19th, setting the hearing for July 19th. There's a public hearing where anyone can come in if they do want to speak on that issue. They speak on the issue. Otherwise, the assessment will be approved, and then we send it off to the account of the auditor controller to put on the property tax. So that's what this particular is.
Has there been any discussion ever to evaluate like our lighting and finding a way for it to pay for itself?
So there have been a couple of discussions in the past. It has gone before the assessment district voters to increase in the past, and that has not it has not been successful. I think it's happened at least once, maybe twice in the past. So our biggest effort has been to reduce costs. Actually, one of the efforts that we're working through now is working with NG, which is a company that this council approved a few years ago to do an energy audit on potentially financing, upgrading all of our high pressure sodium, which are very energy inefficient lights, to LED. And so we're working with them on how we finance that upgrade. That ultimately would actually reduce the cost of that assessment district and the cost, because power costs would come down. So that is an effort that's currently underway.
Great, and when do we expect that to come back?
We're working with the Green Ad Hoc that will probably, toward the end of June, we'll have another presentation from NG. So I would say early summer, something will come back to City Council.
Okay, thank you for the additional information. That's all my questions.
Councilmember Pacheco?
Thank you. Whenever I think streetlights, I have to just kind of harken back to the bike path and how scary it is because the lights are always shot. Could you just kind of remind us as to how we go about fixing lights like that? And even as recently as today,
I had comments from people saying, you know, what's up with the lights and the bike paths, so.
We'll let the public, that's a difficult question, so the public works
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councilman Pacheco. Yeah, we do have budget. We could address some of those lights individually through the bike path areas. So I will ask staff to revisit those.
I'd like to make that a priority.
Sure, absolutely. And I would just like, because apparently Matt just wanted to be hopeful but not introduce, just for informational purposes, the challenges. We do very often replace those, and because of where they're located, it's hard to monitor often, so they very often get destroyed. We're regularly replacing those, you know, so again, we will definitely work to stay on top of that. Just understand that because of where they are, the nature of that area, especially at night, is very difficult. We spend quite a bit of time replacing those, and they're relatively few $100s every time we replace them. So we'll definitely stay on top of it. And
Thank you, because I mean, I'm sure you agree that makes it even more important, right? Because this is so dangerous area and get broken so often, we have to be on it. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
No questions, thank you.
I have no questions. Is there a motion to approve the balance of the motion? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Rodriguez? Yes. Councilmember Pacheco?
Yes.
Councilmember Montanez, she is absent. Vice Mayor Mendoza?
Yes.
And Mayor Dowd.
Yes, motion passes, and now we're at administrative reports. And item 8, informational report regarding the city's updated pavement management program and plan for fiscal year 2021-22 street resurfacing. Nick?
yes, thank you, Mayor. And I will pass this over to Public Works Director Matt Baumgartner to give a presentation. Much of this information was discussed during the CIP budget study session last Wednesday, but tonight is the plan that much of that presentation was based on. And I did just want to make the public announcement that Councilmember Montanez did let staff know that she was not able to participate tonight prior to the meeting. So she did notify staff.
I got this.
Yeah.
It's really nice for that.
21. That was a joke.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. Yeah, this is kind of a bit of a rehash of some of the information we went over at the last session, but with a little more detail. But just a few slides to go through the pavement management program that the city goes through on a 3-year cycle. Essentially, we have our consultant who's been working with us for over 10 years, who's done at least the last 3 pavement management analyses for the city. Going through and looking at every section of street in the city and identifying distresses in the pavement, and just to talk about a few of the common ones you see. The first level of cracking that you see in the street would be the longitudinal cracking that you see over on the left-hand side, and then transverse cracking is perpendicular to that. And that forms the first type of more severe cracking, which you see over on the right-hand side. And the block cracking, essentially, if you think of that as one big square, not all the individual triangles in there. Once the transverse and longitudinal cracking start marrying up, they start forming these larger block cracks. And eventually, as the water works into those cracks, they turn into these smaller triangles, and they look like what would appear to be alligator skin. So they call that alligator cracking. And when you get to that level, it's a lot more severe, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done to fix that. Like I was saying, we do this every 3 years. The number of distresses that are measured on a street section are then calculated and deducted from a score of 100. And that forms what's called the Pavement Condition Index, or the PCI. It's a national standard that's used for roads across the country. And looking at these ranges, anywhere from 86 to 100, which is excellent, all the way down to 0 to 10, which is failed. And this gives you an idea of what percentages of we fall in the city. 17% is considered excellent. almost 31% is considered very good. Good is 17.6%. So if you add those up together, you've got almost 2/3 of the city's roads are considered good to excellent. As a whole, our city's average score was 64.8, which also falls in that good category, 56 to 70. And just to give you an idea of the streets that covers, from good to excellent, you've got, roughly 32 miles in the city are considered good to excellent. And from roughly 24 of those miles don't require any kind of action at this point. So almost 50% of our streets at this time don't require any kind of treatment, but everything below that is either a slurry seal, which is what falls between 60 and 75 on the PCI. Below 60 and above 25 is what we would typically do with an overlay, which is grinding the upper 1.5 to 2 inches off and repaving with asphalt. And then finally, anything 25 or below is just the area you always want to stay away from. And we have about a little over 5% of our streets fall in this category, or about 2.7 miles, is reconstruction, where you have to dig out the entire section of road, roughly a little over a foot and a quarter, and build it all the way back up. It's quite expensive. $7.50 a square foot is what you're looking at there. So your pavement program should aim to stay away from that completely. If we are following a good pavement program here, we will not see any more, in about 5-10 years from now, we will get out of this area of needing to repair, reconstruct roads, and we'll just be doing overlays and slurry seals. So we really need to focus on our slurry seal program going forward. But what we're looking at next year, so we have roughly $3 million this year in the budget for taking some sort of pavement approach. And on average, we probably have about 1.5 million each year from varying sources. We just have a little bit of carryover money this year. That's why we had the 3 million. So this year we have 3 million, and we need to start thinking about how we want to approach things going forward. I know I'm going to talk a little bit later about the water mains. Right now, I'm just going to focus on the pavement condition itself. And we can get 2.5 to 3 miles done with that $3 million if we follow what we've been doing the last several years, which is just doing the thin overlay. We really haven't put much of an effort into the slurry seal, and that's why the streets over the last 10, 20 years have gotten into the situation they are now. So this is really an effort to kind of reverse course. So as an alternative to doing the overlay, what I'm looking at is, and what I talked about with the pavement analyst, is doing what's called a slurry and a dig out approach. And I'm just going to go back to that previous slide. If you look at the worst section on the right-hand side with the block cracking, the alligator cracking, a road like this is a road that you would probably be doing an overlay on, because it's got, it just requires too much work, and if you just put a slurry directly over that, all of those cracks are just going to kind of reflect upwards. So a slurry and a dig out approach actually is that entire section there that you see for the block cracking and the alligator cracking, we would actually be digging that out and paving it back up to, and patching it back up to the surface, sealing any cracks, and then you apply the slurry seal on top of that. This type of approach, while it's not rebuilding the structural section the way an overlay would, it does buy you 5 to 7 years, and it's considerably cheaper. So, at $250 a square foot for doing an overlay, which only allows us to do about 3 miles, the transition to the slurry dig out approach, what we call the holding strategy approach, is at 71 cents a square foot. So it's about 3.5 times cheaper to do this. And it allows you to get a lot of streets done. So if we follow this program over the next year, over the next couple of years, we will get quite a bit done, and I'll show that in the next table here. So, and again, as I was talking about this typical approach, if we're just doing about 1 to 1.5 miles a year with that 1.5 million, it would take us 13 years approximately to do this thin overlay approach, slurrying our better streets. But the big problem with this is that it doesn't allow us to get to those worst streets in the overlay section. We will lose some of them to reconstruction. I estimate we would probably an additional $4 million. So over that 13-year period, we're talking about $25 million to get all of our streets fixed. Doing this holding strategy approach over the next 2 to 3 years, allowed with $6 million that we would be using from different funding sources. We would be doing the slurry and repair approach. We would be repairing our reconstruction streets, and we would be really engaging in the slurry seal program for our better streets. So that is about roughly 6 million. And then it is a temporary approach. It buys us time. It allows us to evaluate the water main and sewer main analysis that I was talking about at the last meeting. I'll go over with that same mapping in here shortly. Buys us that time. But we would need to go back over the next 5 or 6 years and start to address the worst of the streets that we're doing next year with this slurry and dig out approach. And first putting in the water mains, sewer mains that we need to do, and then doing the overlay the correct way. So I just want to go over the holding a strategy approach and sort of the benefits of this, comparing it to our typical approach. You know, we have a potential over time to save $7 million. It will take 10 years instead of 13 years to complete this approach. But over the next 3 years, all damaged streets in the city would be treated on some level. So those worst streets that we're able to get in there and do the slurry and dig out approach, the residents, the people that are traveling through the city will have a nicer road than they will have otherwise. You know, if it takes us 13 years and we can only nibble away at doing it with overlays, a lot of our streets are just going to continue to get worse and worse as the water gets into the unsealed roads. So within 3 years, all of our worst streets will be reconstructed. Our streets that would be overlaying would be now done with the slurry and dig out approach. And then our better streets that we want to keep that way, we would be doing with the slurry seal. And this should keep more streets from needing reconstruction. So this is what I'm saying. The most important thing is keeping us out of this territory going forward. So once we rebuild these streets, we don't want to go back to this point of needing to spend $7.50 a square foot. So we need to do active slurry seal and then overlay once we're out of this holding strategy period in 10 years. And then, as I was saying, it should buy us more time for looking at our water and sewer main construction. And it seals up the roads from water intrusion and further degradation. So by applying the seal now in the next couple of years, it's going to keep water from getting in and making these roads a lot worse. So the cost of an overlay goes up the more you have to do repairs ahead of time. So if we can keep the water out of these overlay streets, it'll save us money in the next few years. And this is the last page of the pavement management report. It represents what we've basically a little over $7 million to address all of the city's streets. As I was saying before, the top, roughly 40% of them don't even need any kind of treatment, but the rest of them, it would allow us to address them in the next 3 years. So this map represents reconstruction, slurry seal, and the slurry seal plus dig outs, plus some of the overlays that we are already committed to doing in this coming year and moving forward. And this is just, these last 2 slides are just going back to what I was showing council at the last budget study session. This slide represents what we're going to be tackling, what we would be tackling in fiscal year 21-22. It's taking on roughly 19 million streets in the city through a combination of overlays, slurry seal plus dig outs, slurry seal. And then the light blue section is the recreation park project that'll be going on over the next couple of years. That's a really bad section of street in town that's actually going to be covered as part of the infiltration project. So those costs are part of that and saves this program quite a bit.
Now, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
Like, you said 19 million streets.
I meant to say 19 miles. Thank you.
Oh,
I've been saying million too many times. So yeah, 19 miles.
okay,
There you go. And then finally, this is the same slide that talked about the water mains. One of the main reasons it's not just the PCI that we're looking at when we're putting together our plan for the next few years. We really want to put this holding approach together because we just have far too many water mains that need to be evaluated. Now, some of them might be okay, but that's what the analysis is going to tell us. But what you see in light green there is some of our older cast iron pipe, which could be upwards of 80 years in age or older. And a lot of the cast iron pipe in the city we don't have issues with, we haven't had leaks, but if we're going to put a road over it that we hope to last 30 years, this is the time to address it if it needs to go. So roughly 1/3 of the city has the newer ductile iron pipe that what you see in the darker navy blue, but the other colors are all older pipe that we need to address. So about 2/3 is over 50 years old. And, we'll do this evaluation to really tighten up these numbers, but, we have the potential of 35 million in water main replacements over the next 20 years. And obviously, as part of our paving program that we're trying to wrap up in the next 10 years and really get well-built roads on top of them, we need to spend, potentially $15 to $20 million in replacements over the next 10 years to match up with the timeline of the pavement program. And so we'll be working on that this year and developing a funding strategy to get caught up on these main replacements. So we'll tighten up these numbers and come back and talk a little bit more about how will we go about addressing this. But that's where I am right now. I want to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions you might have.
thank you very much, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you again for such a great presentation. I really appreciate the way you walk through your methodology and outline the benefits, the tangible benefits to making this short able so it's more effective and it's cheaper, which is awesome. That's what we should be doing all around. I wanted to ask you more about funding sources. I know that you just mentioned that some of what's happening by Rec Park is covered by the project there.
Yes.
When we talk about redoing water mains, what's the source of funds for that? And does it include resurfacing those streets that we're taking up?
No, the funding sources would likely be coming from the state water revolving fund, so it'd be either low interest loans or grants if we can qualify for them. Those would be the most likely for putting in water main infrastructure. Those would be the likely sources of funding for that. So I think we could get favorable terms on, but we would have to evaluate other possible financing terms with Diego, and I can see what the council thinks is a comfortable approach for going forward with that.
And usually those, like any funds secured are only for the actual piping
It would
and
just
not
be
the
for-
actual street.
No, it would not cover the water main. I'm sorry, the street building on top of that. So that would still come from our typical sources, which are from the county, Metro, Measure R, Measure M, Prop C, SB1 from the state. That's what makes up our roughly $1.5 million a year that we get each year for the annual street for resurfacing program.
And so what we're approving today is what exactly?
Really taking this different approach.
Okay.
So number one, we do need to. This doesn't need to be adopted, but it is something that we share with Metro every 3 years. So it's important to do this 3-year cycle. They like to know if we're getting funds to do this work, that we have a thoughtful program in place. And all cities need to do this on a 3-year basis. So it's really just receiving file informing you on that we have this program that we share with Metro, And then, but really it's taking this different approach, instead of just looking at the thin overlay approach, it's kind of this holding strategy is a little bit different, but I think it's something that some cities have done in our scenario, in terms of, again, we have to come back and redo these streets, 3, 5, 7 years down the road. So you're spending a little bit more money, but you're saving money.
And I guess what I want to specifically highlight is that we're not necessarily including what streets.
No.
Giving paper just approving this approach.
Right. And I think what we've tried to do, what I've tried to do with the pavement analyst is to weigh in the condition of pipes, as well as taking into account that we already have some streets that we already promised that we would do in the last year or two that we have to still finish up. So we're sort of committed to some of these streets. But also there's just a balancing, which pipes you're going to address. And we have about $650,000 in money for water main replacements, just out of our water fund. And then another roughly about 500,000 a year that we could look to increase if we want to get ahead of the faster, coupled with the state revolving fund money if we get that.
So at our previous meeting, we had this section that got to the specific
Sure.
districts. So
Yes.
how do you expect the council to relay any of those specifics in the future?
Well, the specific question, in regards to the one area in town, and I did look at that a little more closely. It's hard to see on this map right now, but that part of town is, it is indeed a reconstruction.
What part are you talking about?
I'm sorry, it's over by Las Palmas Park as you're heading. It's along with Woodworth Street, and it is one of the worst sections in town. I think it's a PCI of 23, and it is a small section, but it is in rough shape. It is underlain by old cast iron pipe, so we don't have the budget to address the mains there, and that's the reason why I am addressing it next year, in next year's budget, and we would be doing the mains there next year, because I also want to make sure that second year, third year, we're completing the streets that are in reconstruction territory, because I hear that loud and clear from the council that we don't want to defer that work for too long. So there is a balancing act that we have to do here in terms of being able to save us money, but I think I like the approach of also trying to get the reconstruction streets at 5% of our streets done over the next 2 to 3 years. And I think we should be able to hit that target.
Thank you for hearing that feedback and for being so thoughtful of this approach. That's all my questions.
Thank you very much. Councilman Pacheco.
Thank you. If you could break this down for us, if we're in the 5th grade and we just need to know what's going on, where we're spending money, where we're saving money, the too long didn't read version. Would you say, look, we took a beat, we studied a little bit, we're trying to be sensible about the kinds of repairs that we're doing because of everything below the surface. But obviously, there are still some streets, like you mentioned here at Las Palmas Park, they're going to take a little extra TLC, so to speak. Right? Okay. I think that one of the things I had mentioned when I called in during the session last time, and when I was walking around the city council and I saw the outdoor bulletin board area, kind of clicked with me as well. And you don't necessarily have to put, the public works street map of the year in the water bill, but we could, post the map in the bulletin board, or put it in infographic. So when someone comes by and says, where are we in the streets this year? They can see, boom, this street's getting worked on, that street's getting worked on, and so forth. I think that could be, very kind of simple, easy way to go about it. Otherwise, I'll echo my colleagues' sentiments. I think, it takes some work and some dedication to do this, and it's tough decisions, but ultimately, I think we're all moving in the right direction. So thank you for that, and I will yield my time. Thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Matt, for your presentation and well thought out. You know, I've participated in city council meetings for 7 years, but this is the first time I think I've seen this presented in such a way. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, and I wanted to kind of echo Councilor Pacheco's sort of sentiment about break it down for a fifth grader. I mean, I think the way that we should really frame it is, if we just wanted to keep doing, apparently they didn't teach them how to walk at law school. They wanted to, if we wanted to keep doing things the way governments typically do things, we'd spend $25 million over 15 years to finally touch all of our streets, right? If we want to get in that route. What Matt has really done, which I appreciate, is something that's a little less traditional, right? It's really trying to, sorry, Rich. I hope you're okay. What Matt really thoughtfully said is, how can we touch as many streets as possible in a meaningful way, extending their life 5 to 7 years, you know, get some blacktop down so that there are, you know, some meaningful improvements. It's not the traditional full improvement that would, you know, buy you a lot more time, but it's a meaningful improvement. Cheaply, you know, getting 18 miles done over the next 3 years, at least touched, as opposed to 3 miles over the next 2 years. I think, you know, it's just an innovative way to think about it, so we can provide the most bang for your buck, so to speak. So I do think, I think that level of analysis has not gone into this process in the past. Not ever, I mean, just not in the recent past. So I appreciate that Matt took that approach this year and presented to City Council.
And, you know, Matt, something we can understand. And you know, I support your holding strategy. It's great. I think that it's going to make a lot of residents very happy, because we know that this is one of their top priorities, is getting on our streets. And so I support your approach, and thank you for this laborious project and work that you've taken on. You know, there's more to come. It's just the beginning. Thank you. Thank you.
Will this work take Measure A and Measure SF funds?
Yes. Yes, it will. I believe so. The capital outlay, the $500,000 that was set aside, will include funds for redoing our streets as well.
I think our residents will be very happy to learn that Measure A, Measure SF will go to the streets. And I want to thank my colleagues for excellent questions. Please, and thank you for your presentation. And now we'll move on to item 9, presentation and discussion regarding an update on enforcement activities associated with illegal fireworks. And we will also discuss item 12. Item 12. And this item was added to the agenda by Councilmember Rodriguez. Discussion and consideration to approve reinstituting the city-sponsored July 4th fireworks celebration event show. So, Nick, we talked about possibly both Councilmember Celeste and Chief. It's kind of being one item that we could just go back and discuss. Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly. So, what I'd like to do is have the chief give an update on that was requested by council last week on some of the illegal firework activity. Get a little direction from council on some steps to take this year to discourage illegal use of illegal fireworks, and then we can move sort of seamlessly into the fireworks, which may be part of a long-term solution to fireworks display. So yeah, let's talk to him. We'll start with the chief's piece, but from a discussion standpoint, we can talk to him together, talk about them together. So with that, Chief, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Let's speak a little bit of history, a little background on this. Back in 1957, the city adopted an ordinance defining fireworks, the unlawful possession and sales of fireworks, except specifically permitted. In the late 1980s, or up to late 1980s, the city allowed safe and sane fireworks to be sold and discharged within the city limits. Then the city decided to ban all sales of safe and sane fireworks and deemed the discharge of all types of fireworks illegal. Additionally, the city's current and past contracts with the City of Los Angeles Fire Department to provide fire protection and emergency medical services require the city to fully adopt the City of Los Angeles Fire Code and Building Code, essentially deeming all fireworks illegal except for as permitted if we have a fireworks display. Over the years, the police department has been the primary source for addressing ongoing issues with illegal possession and discharging of fireworks within city limits. After several complaints and meetings with several members of the community, city staff began developing additional measures to combat the growing problem of illegal possession and discharge of fireworks. In 2015, the City Council approved increased penalties for possession, sales, and discharging of illegal fireworks within city limits per the San Fernando City Code Section 38-106 subsection A. As you can see on the packet, that started on page 201. On the second page of this document, I have a little area that shows the different fines for within the 1 year period. For the first offense is $1,000, and if it's they don't pay it on time, it's a $250 late fee, which will bring that up to a maximum of $1,250. For a second violation is $2,000 with a $500 late fee, which would be a total of $2,500. And if it's a third offense within that 1 year period, it's $3,000 with a $1,000 late fee, would bring a total of $4,000. In 2020, city staff reached out to CSUN, and they developed a web-based type program for public submittal of seen and heard illegal fireworks within the city limits. The application includes option for entering the incidents locations via address and or interactive nav, and is capable with both a desktop and mobile application device. The form submittals are submitted to the city staff through the website or through the application, and it records and captures and stores in a database to be made accessible to staff for future use. This application is currently located on the city website and has received a total of 322 reported fireworks incidents throughout the city and surrounding areas, and within and 51 reported since 2021, January 2021. This application is monitored on a weekly basis, and the police department utilizes this data for increased enforcement in the heavily reported areas within the city limits. Staff of the police department is working with the Los Angeles Fire Department to obtain their fire department public safety video on fireworks that will be available to the city on the city website, as well as we're going to be displaying electronic messaging boards throughout the city when they're available, displaying all fireworks are illegal and dangerous. Additionally, push out notification, English and Spanish, will be sent through the Alert San Fernando and through the city's various email lists, which includes Business Watch, Neighborhood Watch, and throughout others that we have available to us as well. Additional public notification discouraging the possession and usage of illegal fireworks can be provided through door hangers, multiple public service announcements advertising in the local newspaper, and banners to be placed on city major streets. These actions require additional expenditures, which can be funded through savings in the city council professional services account. The police department is currently utilizing our police reserve division to conduct fireworks special enforcement for visibility as a deterrent and cite those that are seen in possession and or discharging illegal fireworks. In the last 2 years, the police department cited 50 individuals for fireworks violations at a penalty cost of $1,000 each for each citation as a minimum. The major challenge for us in enforcing fireworks is the law requires us to see the violation and in person or in any act for us to either cite them or arrest them, depending on what the violation of the fireworks would be under the local and state laws. So it's a little bit of a challenge for us, but we're trying to make headway as best we can. We've come up with a number that we feel that would help us out with our public campaign, which would include door hangers, the local newspaper banners, is about $3,500. And we're asking the city council to approve that as listed here on the budget impact. I'm open for any questions or any additional comments from our city manager.
Thank you, Chief. And I just wanted to, for additional information, the $3,500 is just, it's not an additional appropriation. I just wanted to put that out there because City Council usually each year pays our interpreter because that's, usually set aside and appropriated for that activity. This year, obviously those services were reduced due to COVID. So there is plenty of savings. There's already funds appropriated in the City Council's budget. I just wanted to request that we use those we have a door hanger ready to go that has information basically saying fireworks are illegal. If caught, you will be fined. It's $1,000. And then we also use the opportunity to don't forget to get your COVID vaccine and sign up for city notifications on there. But we do have something that's ready to go. So assuming that we get approval to expend those funds from City Council budget, we can start that immediately and get that out there. And we also can start the PSAs and print newspaper and some of those other things, some of those other items that the chief mentioned. And I think the big one, and we'll just put it out there so that we can have a full discussion. The chief's been bugging me for 3 or 4 years saying that it would probably go a long way if we actually had our 4th of July fireworks. It would help people kind of relieve some of the pent up frustration. So let's have an actual fireworks show. So thank you to Councilmember Rodriguez for agendizing that tonight. It's very timely to have that discussion about looking at potentially reinstituting that 4th of July fireworks show. May not solve the problem, but it will give a lot of people an outlet that may reduce some of the illegal fireworks if we are able to do that. Obviously, that would require budget allocation. So we want to talk about it now so we can work that into the budget later. I'll let her go into a little bit more the reasoning as to why the council brought that up. But I think with that, we're here to discuss both items and we'd love feedback.
Start with the chief side and then back to you. Thank you. So very nice with the I will start with the chief and ask questions, but we'll come back to you to talk about your item. And I'll start with you, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chief, for this presentation. I really like everything you outlined for the public engagement strategy to make people aware of this. I definitely think that things that we commented on before were heard, and I appreciate that it's part of your plan. I'm of course supportive of the funds you need to pursue that strategy. I did have a question overall though. You mentioned there were 15 citations, $1,000 each that have been issued. Have we recovered those, and where do those funds go? Because I'm thinking, could they go to perpetually fund our public engagement strategy to support curbing illegal firework use, and then hopefully in the future even supporting our fireworks show?
When we issue the citation, they're on administrative sites, and then it's handled here at City Hall. Once it comes over here, I really don't know if they collect all the fees from it, or they make they work out something if they depend on some arch system. So I don't know if Nick has that or any follow up on that part.
Yeah, for that, we'll have to look at exactly how much has been collected, but the chief is right. There is an administrative appeal process. There is actually an administrative hearing officer that comes, at various times throughout the year. So anyone that does get a citation, does have the opportunity to appeal that citation. So I don't know the status of all 15 of those. Where does it go? It's basically general revenue, just like a parking ticket or a traffic ticket. It's a citation that goes into the fines and forfeitures account, a revenue account in the general fund. So, and again, a lot of times you give out 15, sometimes they get reduced by an administrative hearing officer or with that, whatever that means. But we can get information exactly how much has been collected, but I would suspect it's a little less than $15,000.
That'd be great to hear that. Thank you. My next question. In thinking of ways to curb this, I know we're going to get to the other item right now. Are sparklers legal? And are they is there an alternative that we can encourage people to utilize as opposed to like banning?
Well, technically sparklers are not, they are illegal because you usually get those through Safe and Sane packets they're sold in the city of Fillmore and up in Palmdale as well. Of course, we try to discourage people from, utilizing those because they are illegal. It's kind of like anything else. We have to see it, a violation for us to act upon it. And, but yeah, those are illegal and that's to be part of our campaign as well, is to show that, hey, even those little things are dangerous, but they can start fires, especially in the dry conditions that we're in now, or we're in a drought. One of the, I would say it's one of the worst ones, but we're very bad. So those little sparks can cause fires, and that's where we want. We don't want anybody to get hurt.
Mhm.
So,
Has our Recreation and Community Services Department considered any like alternative events or activities to maybe send to homes to provide other ideas and find the packs?
No, not at this moment.
We have not, but we can definitely put that on our list of something to look at, alternative ways to celebrate.
Yeah, alternative ways like to have people engage in the holiday, right? And then reiterating the risks associated with alternatives.
Yeah, LED lights, glow sticks, that type of thing.
Mhm. And maybe even that's something, right, like come by on 4th of July for a pack of glow sticks for your family. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's just other ways to encourage people to participate in the holiday without endangering. I think that concludes my questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Pacheco.
Thank you for your presentation, Chief. Obviously, fireworks are a big part of San Fernando, like it or not. I mean, they pretty much go 6 weeks straight, every single night before 4th of July. So we've all lived it, and it's a tough issue. One thing on the electric signage, and you've probably already thought about this in terms of the actual copy, the actual messaging, but I would encourage to actually put the dollar amount of the fine on there, just straight up fireworks illegal, $1,000 fine, one strike, or whatever it is. Like, if you put that price tag on there, I think it might be a little bit more of a deterrent than saying that they're dangerous, because people engage in dangerous activities all the time. Secondly, did you mention whether we were using is it Nixle or Pixel messaging as well? Is that something we might explore? Is that something you really just wanted to say for emergencies?
it's through Alert San Fernando. Nixle is not, it's no longer in existence.
Alert
So we converted over to Alert San Fernando. That's the replacement of it. That's no longer supported. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna send messages out, as often as we can.
Excellent. Okay. And then thirdly, you had kind of mentioned that in a lot of ways, the police officers' hands are tied because they have to, witness or what have you. So this question is to our city attorney. Perhaps you might be able to research or look into how we might be able to tighten up the local laws, or is this something that the state law is just going to kind of usurp and we have to just do what California says, or is there something that we can explore to give our police officers a little bit more leniency?
Yeah, as far as the fine schedule goes, I believe San Fernando is probably at the statutory limit the state of California allows.
But we're seeing more about like the evidentiary and what we
No,
know.
unfortunately, that's not. Sorry, this is very static. That's not simply a feature of fireworks enforcement. It's a feature of the nature of the offense, and unfortunately, fireworks and I believe certain other type of misdemeanor offenses have to be actually witnessed by the citing officer in order to be prosecuted. It is very frustrating because in any other legal context, you could rely on witness statements, you could rely on recordings. Unfortunately, in this context, you cannot.
Okay, thank you. And I think we had mentioned we're going to get to the fireworks show, but just very briefly, I 100% support like a big blowout Independence Day fireworks show. More to come. Thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I'm glad that you mentioned that it also, the fine includes possession of the fireworks, right?
That's correct.
And important for residents to know as well that you have to catch them in the act, because it's really frustrating. Some of them are just like, that it's affecting their mental health actually in some areas. I've gotten calls from residents on how affected they're being by the fireworks.
as well as their pets as well too. It's very traumatic for the pets.
That's really bad as well. So what is the best scenario like for residents when they, you know, they hear the fireworks? What do you need from them?
Well, really the best thing to do is to call us right away. You know, obviously, if we have higher priority calls, you know, crime in progress, that's gonna take precedent. So we'll go there to handle the fireworks call afterwards. But I think what we have to emphasize to the public is that program that's on the website is very good, but it's not real time for us because it doesn't alert us right there in a second. You know, we have to go into the program and look into it. So it's more helpful for us if we get the call for service call from the public, as well as they put it in the program as well. So we can see the data and we can actually track it a little bit better. But if we need that call for service right away, they can call us. It's not a 911 call, but it calls on a regular line that would really help us out a lot. But once again, we have to take in priority as well. If there's something that's more of a higher priority, it's going to take a little bit longer, but normally we get there pretty quick. So we try to catch them in the act. It's always a little bit of a challenge. Other agencies throughout the years have done some undercover tactics, dressing officers in plain clothes. That creates a little bit of a danger, especially if we confront the people and they don't recognize us as police officers. They start challenging and it can create a different type of scenario for us. But we want to be visible. We want to be in full uniform and marked black and white vehicles. We want to make sure everybody knows we're a police officer. So we try to do it as best we can. But yeah, if they call us, it's really the best.
For example, I sit in my back room, through the window, I can see that they're like 3-4 blocks away. I don't know exactly where they're coming from. Is that something that I would report?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. It's better to report it and not to report it because we just don't know what's going on around us. Somebody reports it to us. Unfortunately, there's a lot of times that the fireworks is going on outside of our city. And if you look at that map on the program, there's quite a few instances reported that are actually just outside of our city. People, they just don't understand where our borders are, or they realize that our 91340 zip code, city of San Fernando, that's just really a postal zip code, and that doesn't mean that you're within our jurisdiction. So there's quite a few. That 91340 goes all the way down to Laurel Canyon, goes all the way over to Corcoran and up to Bond Street. Those areas are not in our city, or partially in Sylmar, partially into Lake Terrace, but still kind of gives us the data anyways. We can show people, well, you reported it, we have activity going on within our jurisdiction, but you can see it's all around our jurisdiction as well. And sometimes it's really kind of hard to tell exactly where that fine line is because you just can't tell because it's loud, it echoes and just too many variables. So it's better if we can get the call and reports and we can make that determination where it falls in our jurisdiction. Hopefully we can catch them in the act. We can cite them, or if they have a large amount, we'll arrest them and send a message out because we want to make sure all residences are safe. We sure don't want anybody to get hurt, even if it's just a minor injury. It's just we can save one minor injury. It's well worth the activities that we're able to prevent.
And when you go into the app, there's a little blue point there on the map. Does that mean, does it move, or is it just something? It's just a picture of a point on the map. When on the app, it's
I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that.
I don't know if you could show that.
I probably can. Give me
Some kind of curious, just so I don't know if everyone's gone to it to see how it works, but just so you can kind of look.
It's a little challenge kind of maneuvering around in there. It's but it's a good start for us, and hopefully as time goes on, that app will get updated and more improved and a little more advanced for us as we continue to develop.
Yeah, it's fairly simple, I've used it, but on the phone you can't see the whole wordings on some of the drop-down menus.
And just so we're on the from the homepage sfcity.org, it is actually right at the bottom of the page. There is the report of illegal fireworks. So you click here. And so this is the form that pops up. So you would enter the date and time of the incident. This is really, it's not, we don't need you to be a fireworks expert. This is really how you felt about it. Was it a moderate, and these are just some examples of, what we consider moderate, small firecrackers, or whether, major is when, it's basically a fireworks show. So, I'll put minor for now. Description of fireworks, you could just, put whatever you want in here. It's an open field. And then you can just you can report whatever you'd like.
And Nick, if you can go back up there where it says neighbor, if you can, sometimes give us because it's anonymous, obviously, give us an address, because the neighbor can be 2 doors down, 4 doors down, it can be anywhere. So if we can narrow it down as best as possible, that really would help us out.
So that's another type, field that you type. This, I believe, you can put in the address. So if you put in, I don't know, 117. So then it would, so it basically goes to where you put. So it's not necessarily as currently constituted. It's not necessarily a drag and drop, but you can point to a place on the map. You don't have to put in. So if you're over here, you can just click here, and it will put the point. So you don't necessarily need an address. You can click somewhere on the map and then if you do have any, if you took pictures, you can upload pictures. Your name is optional, phone number is optional, email is optional, and then you can. I'll just put in test here. And then you can submit it. And when you see, and then it will come back with a check mark saying that your complaint was successfully submitted.
Thank you. And when you go on the phone, on the app on your phone, I don't think the map part of that, I've not seen that feature when I've done it from my phone. I'm gonna have to check that.
Yeah, we'll review.
So yeah, it's a little different on the phone. Just to have that bigger area.
I appreciate your presentation, and I support the 3,500. I'm going to get them out for hangers and banners and get the word out. The alerts too. Thank you.
How many years have we had this fine for the illegal fireworks?
Well, the fines were established. I don't know how far back, but I would assume it's probably when the ordinance first started back in 1957. The fines were really low. That's why back in 2015 is where they reevaluated and brought it up to 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000. I believe it was only like $100, $150, I mean, a couple $100, which really, it's not very effective. So that's when the city council decided to raise it up and make it more significant. So it really puts a financial impact on the violators.
Since 2015, last year, you know how many citations?
Yeah, and well, we had a total of 322 since the start of this program of incidents. We had in the last 2 years, we had only cited 15. We were able to cite 15 people last year to this year.
And if someone chooses to report their neighbor shooting or fireworks, does that work, or it actually has to be a police officer?
Well, that will help us, and what that will do is how it works. If it's a misdemeanor, we have some video evidence. We will collect the information, start the investigation, identify that person, and then we would submit it to the district attorney for filing to obtain a warrant for that person's arrest. Because it's still a misdemeanor committed out of our presence, and we can't go just over there and cite them or arrest them. There's a process for that. But if it was a felony, if we determined, let's try an example, they had a whole garage full of fireworks, and we can have video of it. And pretty obviously, it was a whole garage full of illegal fireworks. If that's a felony, then that will give us probable cause to go investigate right at that location and make that inquiry without having an arrest warrant. But we still have some legal boundaries that we have to follow as well too. But it gives us a little more investigative tool to handle this a lot quicker versus a misdemeanor where there's a little bit more of a process. Either way, it's still a process, but we try to do it as best we can and try to be as efficient and of course legally, so we don't have any issues down the road.
Yeah, Nick, I'm wondering whether your neighbors, this is maybe you need to say it's a misdemeanor and they can be arrested. So I think that's important statement.
We can add that next to legal. We do have that to legal.
And does anyone have any follow-up questions before we move on? Okay, thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Richard, did you, okay, Councilmember
We need to
Richard?
take a vote.
Um,
Not the 3500?
No votes necessary. I got direction from all four. The funds are already appropriated, so we don't need an official vote. The direction's fine.
All yours, Councilmember.
Thank you. So in front of you is a session and consideration to approve the instituting the city-sponsored 4th of July fireworks celebration event show. I noticed that some of my notes for this agenda items left off, so if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to read it really quickly. In recognition of the San Fernando residents' passage of Measure SS, the City Council should consider the return of the city-sponsored fireworks show and 4th of July celebrations. In addition to showing appreciation to our city residents, returning the fireworks show can support the San Fernando business community and potentially curb illegal firework use, enhancing community safety. As was decided for this meeting, this goes hand in hand with the chief's presentation. And even to your comment, Councilman Pacheco, the fireworks show fireworks are part of San Fernando. The show was around for like 2 decades, and you'll see the history on the agenda item. And unfortunately, because of the budget situations in the past, it was ended. However, although in a challenging budget conversation now, it's really about what sort of enhancements we'll be purchasing with our really great budget situation. And so there are a couple things before you. One of them is to consider allocating funds for this year. Obviously, there's a very short turnaround to 4th of July. However, this would just allow staff to evaluate that opportunity and the feasibility both just logistically and whether or not a vendor is even available to pursue an event for this year. And the second one is for them to prepare a report with a plan for an entire celebration for this year to come back before us in January, so we have enough time to contribute feedback and make some plans for next year's celebration. So I hope it has your support. I know the residents are supporting this and would really love it, and I really do think it would help out. We know that fireworks has become a bigger issue every year, and returning this to the city to support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Pacheco.
Thank you. Like I said, I mentioned before, I absolutely support it, just not at the cost of our other enhancements, things like the shelters and so forth. So as long as we can afford it and there's relative consensus from staff in terms of our financial position, I think what is it, $20,000? I would see a problem with that. So thank you for bringing this item up, because I do think that now that we're relatively past COVID, and it can actually get that energy and channel it into something else besides doing it in your front yard. I think that it's sensible, it's nostalgic, and I definitely support it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor. I support your request 100%. That's it. Okay. I do support most of your requests. I think that we just should look at July 4th, 2022. And I really think we have to increase the amount not to exceed $35,000 instead of $30,000. I think it's going to be very costly. There's going to be some, everybody has raised the cost of everything. The market, the gas prices, what have you. So I think not to exceed $35,000, but not to do anything for 2021. I just think the deadline is so short, and staff is so busy with the budgeting process, and we're understaffed. And I'm just That's my primary reason, just factoring all of that in. But I support 100% with the additional $5,000.
I was gonna ask staff for the feedback.
Oh, okay, Ms. Sheehan.
Yeah, I think for 2020, so I agree that probably should be a little more of a budget. You know, at $20,000, you know, 8 or 9 years ago, if you want to put on a good show, it should probably, I mean, the 35 probably be more appropriate, maybe even 40. You know,
Yeah, because we don't want to fizzle, we don't want to.
right, we don't want to, we
Yes.
don't want it to be happening, yes. Yeah, with regards to this 4th of July, it actually it takes sort of months of logistical planning. Even just quite frankly, to even do a show, we'd have to get a permit from LAFD, which I almost feel like we're gonna have to start on July 1st, 2021 to get a permit, you know, by like the year later. They're gonna have some pretty significant requirements. They're gonna wanna know the site that we do it from. They're gonna wanna know what our fire plan is surrounding that site. So getting PD, you know, PD will have to logistically have a plan, a staffing plan. And I believe what the chief was kind of telling me is that they've sort of already done their vacation, you know, approvals and everything for July. So we have to call back quite a bit of folks. So in the next month or so. So I just think with this month, it just be logistically, I don't even know that we could get a permit, you know, from LFD or even a location. I think part of it will also be identifying a location to use, and we'll have to, you know, look at a few different ones. So, but I think honestly, we probably need to come back to council earlier than January with the plan. I appreciate that much time, but if assuming council comes, we want to start. We'll have to start like today for next year. It's a pretty significant event. So that would be my recommendation. And also as far as the amount, what I would actually suggest is that I have, as part of the budget presentation, upcoming item, sort of an interactive, you know, where I can put it into that sort of interactive enhancement request, and we can kind of see like how that all kind of plays out to the Councilmember Pacheco's point. You know, may not necessarily need to be at the cost of any other enhancement.
Recognizing that logistically it would be possible for this year, then do we even need to consider it in this budget cycle since it will be in the next fiscal year?
So we would probably need to expend all of our funds in the 21-22 year. You know, we'd have to pay the vendor. So even though it's like 4th of July 2022, which technically is the following fiscal year, we would have to pay the bill in, you know, probably May.
So we'll be looking to potentially allocate funds in this budget year for next year's returning it. Could we also ask for RCS to come back with some ideas of what could be maybe put together to at least offer families and community members ideas for this coming 4th of July?
Yeah, I think that is a doable, you know, as far as putting out information and, you know, potentially even like you said, giving some giveaways. I believe that's definitely doable in this fiscal year. In this month period between now and 4th of July.
Okay.
I think that might be a fun exercise.
Well, we look forward to the ideas that come back from RCS. And if you're ready, if you can go.
Vice Mayor has a question.
I was overzealous on the fireworks display, but just in terms of the drought, you know, because we're into drought season already, you know, warning areas or alert or emergency areas for fire. You know, we could take a really close look at that before we make a final decision.
Sure, I would, you know, what I would request for tonight is at least direction from staff, from council to look in, to start the process of planning a 2022 4th of July celebration, fireworks celebration. So that direction, obviously that would be pending pending appropriating the funds through the budget process for next year. So assuming we got funds appropriated, we would start right away. That's gonna, you know, that whole plan, part of the permitting process through LAFD, I can almost guarantee will be, you know, fire safety, drought considerations, where, make sure that we have, wherever we shoot off the fireworks, I'm sure there'll be some sort of radius that needs to have fire protection, so that all of that will be, we will be required to come up with a lot of that plan just through our permitting process, I'm sure.
I support it, but I do support those recommendations.
I'd just like to say that when we voted not to move forward with the fireworks show back in 2013, I believe, Councilmember was always Councilmember Hartle. They were really upset about it and tried to raise funds, and it just didn't pan out. So here we are. It's a very interesting situation. We have Councilmember Rodriguez, carrying that torch and bringing it forward because it is a very important. That's what Councilmember Hartle that's always had stated. It's very important to the community. But when you have your foot on bankruptcy, you just cannot put a match to $30,000. It's just not reasonable. But we are in a much better place, and I'm very grateful for our Councilmember Rodriguez that she did bring this forward. And I'm sure former Councilmember Gonzalez is going to be really fun. So we're ready for your motion.
Is that right? Do you need a motion or did you receive enough direction?
We could get a symbolic motion.
Okay, I motion that we return that we allow staff to pursue the logistics and feasibilities to return the fireworks show for 2022. I'm not sure because of the funding, because I think we still need to look at priorities, but
Sure.
to consider appropriating approximately $35,000 for that planning and preparation. Armor.
I'll second that. Okay, roll call.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Pacheco,
Yes.
Councilmember Montanez is absent, Vice Mayor Mendoza,
Yes.
Mayor Mallon.
Yes, the motion passes. Thank you very much. We are now on item 10, discussion and consideration to approve a professional services agreement with Lazar Development Consultants for the development of a homeless plan and related services. And before we start, I have a question. I thought you had the authority to sign off on the $25,000. I'm a little confused about this.
Yes, I do, and I'll kind of go through the strategy behind this particular request here. So, as you mentioned, Mayor, there is this is a not to exceed of $25,000, which technically it could do through administrative authority. However, I think as we go through this process of developing a homelessness plan, and then we get into sort of the implementation phase, I think the council will be interested in potentially the consistency of potentially continuing some of the services of this particular group. So consultation group. So if the council approves the original $25,000 agreement, then I actually have the authority to assuming there's funding, but I have the authority to increase another $25,000 administratively if there are additional implementation scope of work. So really, this is doing some of the work up front to allow for potentially down the road if we're happy and want to implement some of these strategies that ultimately come out of the homelessness plan that will allow us to do that administratively. So that's that. I completely skipped all the context, and I won't go too into this. But we did do an RFP process. We did get some funds from the County Measure H Innovation Funds to appropriate to put about $22,000 toward a homelessness plan that conforms with the county's the countywide homeless plan. Once we develop a homeless plan, that will actually open up opportunities for additional Measure H funds and other funding sources to fund some of these strategies. So it's kind of the base document that we lays out a roadmap on a few different strategies that will work in San Fernando, that we could implement in San Fernando to address some of our homeless population. So we went through the process. We worked with the homeless ad hoc, which is Councilmember Rodriguez and Councilmember Montanez, on reviewing the RFP before it went out. Once it went out, we received our proposals, worked with the ad hoc to review those proposals. We interviewed the top two firms and we turned around and were able to quickly get consensus on a recommendation. And before you tonight is a recommendation to approve a professional service agreement with LASAR Development Consultants. As I mentioned, not to exceed $25,000 to develop the plan, and then authorize city manager to make substantive changes to the agreement and ultimately approve additional scope of work if required during the implementation phase. And if there are additional community outreach meetings, I think each of these, I believe the proposal included only about one community outreach meeting, so there may be the desire or the need for more as we get into it. So that's another reason I wanted to kind of include this as a council approved agenda. So with that, LASAR demonstrated, very comprehensive knowledge. Not only have they prepared a number of homeless plans for LA County cities, they're also working with a number of cities on implementation plans. So they provide a wide range of services, and they did a very good job of explaining those services to staff from the homeless ad hoc. So I did want to give Councilmember Rodriguez an opportunity to provide some feedback from the on behalf of the ad hoc, and then I'll open up to City Council for questions.
Thank you. So when we're reviewing the proposal, I just want to recognize that a lot of staff contributed their thoughts about which firms were best suited for this work. We did proceed to an interview for two of the top firms that were rated highest amongst everyone's independent evaluation. We considered a lot of things, like Nick said, the experience both in the subject area, but also in our geographic area, and also what stood out with their ability to kind of cross over to different subjects, such as the tie-in of housing when it comes to homelessness and other factors, and not only being able to look at the different pieces that go along with homelessness issues and solutions. What I did want to mention to you all as well is that we were really interested in making sure that we selected someone who could tailor the report to San Fernando's unique needs. Both our size, the population's needs that we see, engaging people with lived experience, not only having the public meetings, but also potentially having the opportunity to do surveys, trying to figure out how we can engage the public the most in creating something that would make sense for San Fernando for us to actually be able to implement after it's completed. Any questions anyone has, we're happy to answer, but we really thought that this firm came out strongest when we looked at those specific things. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, certainly do have a few questions, and this could be for whoever feels the need to chime in. For starters, Mr. Kimball, you had mentioned that they had also done implementation aspects to it. Could you give us some examples, or is that kind of like a confidential type report for each city, or what can you share in terms of like ideas they come up with? So,
yeah, I mean, just in general, some implementation. A lot of it has to be related to policies, training. So there'll be a recommendation in the plan, and also there's a bunch of different. There are many different stakeholders in homelessness, not only locally but like countywide. So a lot of times there's a plan to engage these stakeholders when you have persons experiencing homelessness that could use these services. But then that it needs to get off of the document and into action, right? So what I know they've worked with the City of Burbank and one of their primary clients, but a couple of other clients that they're helping to take that off the page of the plan and implement the policies, recommend the training, get working groups together with the different stakeholders to make sure that there's that dialogue between, for example, the City of San Fernando and City of LA. We share a lot of borders, right? So they liaison with they can help us to liaison with those different agencies and LASA. So there's a lot of the implementation piece is really taking what's on the page and turning it into reality. And they really have that expertise. We don't have our own housing services department here in San Fernando. So to a certain extent, they can assist us with some of those best practices and making those connections so that we do implement something that's in the plan, not just have it sit on the shelf.
Okay, and from your perspective, Councilwoman Rodriguez, on that ad hoc committee, were there any strategies or implementation of policies that stood out to you as particularly attractive for San Fernando? Is it too early? I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but.
So, with that firm, I don't think we discussed like a specific intervention that they were automatically gonna recommend. I think it was mostly evaluating how they would approach our city, look at the data and incorporate it with different strategies. I think they best articulated that they're able to, like, they know the space well enough to see all of the best practices, and even one of the questions was how they would incorporate like innovations. Like a lot of people are trying to stop homelessness right now. So some things are really creative, and they express the ability to dive into some of those and further discuss them to make sure that if there is an idea, it will fit San Fernando before we pursued it. I think to illustrate Nick's point, an idea that I think just came up generally in the conversations with different firms was, for example, if they identify that some San Fernando residents might be at risk of homelessness because they're, maybe COVID impacted them and they're unable to pay their rent. There are interventions like something called problem solving, where Measure H is funding a lot of money to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority to deploy people who are able to talk it out with someone and say, what's the problem? And it's a social work intervention. How do we come up with a solution together? And sometimes flexible funds are needed, right? Like, well, if I had $400 to fix my car, I could get to work and I'm gonna make money to pay my rent. So this is a very, very detailed example, but they have flexible funds to support people like that and resolve issues before they become homeless. So if someone outlined in a plan, San Fernando would be prime based on our residents and our needs to be part of a program like that that's already funded. We then need to go to implementation and say how, like we should, and then how do we do it, right? Is someone coming here and co-locating twice a week? Are we getting funds from the county to do that? So it's kind of where the plan turns into something real. And what's really unique about these plans is it's not just an idea. Measure H funded these innovation grants so people could actually make plans to then implement them. So it's exciting because I think we'll see things turn around really quickly, and that was the interest of our ad hoc. And I'll recognize Councilmember Montanez, she really urged us to approve this by today because the plan put forth could be done by November to approve a plan and then start pursuing additional funds. So I gave you a really big answer to that, but I hope it illustrated the point.
And thank you to the ad hoc yourself and Ms. Montanez absolutely for doing that vetting and the due diligence behind it. My second, idea or thoughts on this, and I'm by no means an expert on homelessness. I'm a student still learning, what all the problems and the impacts and so forth. But did you feel, or this to staff as well, did you feel that they addressed affordable housing and Section 8? Because I know those issues are very hot button and very tough for the communities to kind of get behind. And yet they are so important for, trying to, go about helping homelessness. So I'm wondering, is that part of their implementation, or are they trying to stay away from that? I mean, what was your impression?
So I think just to kind of reiterate what Councilman Rodriguez said, we didn't necessarily get into the level of detail of any of the firms coming up with specific recommendations. I do know that this particular firm has a lot of experience in even in the housing, like you mentioned, rent subsidy type of programs. It's going to be a toolkit, right? Like what they're going to come up with will be a toolkit. There's no one, smoking gun to be able to, solve all of these problems. There's probably 10 or 15 simultaneous strategies that are going to need to be implemented. And they did, some of the questions that were asked is what is the, which jurisdiction did you work with that you're most proud of? And I forget exactly what city it was, but they did mention a city that not only did they come up with a lot of these innovative toolkit strategies, but many of them have been implemented, and it really is making a big difference in that particular homeless. In there, not just homeless, but the almost homeless. The housed homeless, if you so to speak. someone that's homeless, but they're not on the streets and living on someone's couch. They're couch surfing, or they're living in a car that's parked in someone's driveway. So they didn't necessarily. None of these firms got into the details of what the plan might be, because again, they didn't want to be presumptive. Like, they're really, the stakeholder meetings are really important with local stakeholder groups, local folks that, similar to like the housing TAC. There's or housing element TAC. Like there will be sort of some group that assists, that does have that are stakeholders and would be part of at least developing some of these strategies in the toolkit.
And I just want to mention, part of the plan they put forth includes having individual meetings with each council member to discuss your perspective on the challenges that the city is facing and propose solutions. So feedback like that will be taken from all of us, and also at their public engagement opportunities.
Okay, I'll reserve the rest of my questions for, we can talk offline, but thank you for the presentation. Thanks for all that info and hard work. Appreciate it.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I want to thank the ad hoc committee, the homeless ad hoc committee, Councilmember Rodriguez and Benez, for the work that you've done on it, and I look forward to seeing the plan. I do have a question though regarding the month of November. Why is that particular? Why does this have to be done, or so you can have done November for funding? What funding is that?
No reason for November. Each of the firms outlined their plan, and they each had a different timeline, but it did stand out that they seemed somewhat faster than other firms. So I think we saw it as an efficiency. No reason that it would be November. Just that's something they propose, and it's undoubtedly flexible. In addition to individual meetings with us, they plan like a city council study session about it before drafting a plan and coming forward. So I definitely don't think it's a hard and fast deadline. They just propose that. And then I wanted to point out, I know it's a review, but there's just but on page 238, there's just 2 pages that outline kind of what they're planning. It was as proposed, right? The scope of work will outline anything different that anyone thinks should be different. I think that should be to think.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, are they going to go out and actually talk to the homeless here in our city of San Fernando?
So I had asked them about what they would be doing with people with lived experience, is how like it's described in all of these plans. They articulated, that people, and Nick, you might have recalled me differently, but I recall them saying that just there is a varying level of need and ability to engage with people experiencing homelessness. So from what I understood, there would be an effort, but also a recognition that, of course, right, people might not participate.
Yeah, I agree with that. They did mention, the difficulty with, a lot of these meetings, sometimes they're Zoom, so they don't always have people experiencing homelessness don't always have that access. That being said, it's also a little bit more on the it's a little more on the implementation end than the plan end once you start getting into the engagement with homeless.
I do think that, thank you for that question, because I do want to mention, I think in the scope, right, like we have a fairly small number of people experiencing homelessness, and we know our officers went out and talked to everyone not so long ago. There's something called a demographic survey that happens at the point in time count annually, which is like a federally mandated thing that happens every January. I think it's possible that they do that, go out and talk to people about what their experience has been. We could learn a lot. Did they live in San Fernando at some point in their life? Is that why they're comfortable here? Or did it come from where they stayed? So it would be, I'd be interested in finding out what that would take to add it to the scope of work. And then I assume it would fit into the budget allocation that you requested.
Sure, yeah, and we can certainly talk to them about, I believe that, one of the upcoming host details, I know there's funding for those, I don't know what the next one is, but if we have Lisa on board, that's part of the scope question. You could say, well, let's have, can you go along with that host detail and maybe ask some of these questions, it's kind of building a foundation with some of these folks is to, to help go into that plan. So that's certainly something we can request. And part of why I wanted to come to council, because I can add that, to the scope if necessary. And we'll certainly talk to them about that, assisting us in the next host detail.
One of my concerns is capturing the newly homeless, because I think this is going to be a really big problem. 2022, maybe the end of 2021. Is that factored into your plan, capturing the newly homeless?
So I think it's something we have to discuss with the SAR, right? I know that they plan to like hit the ground running according to their timeline. I think that goes back to kind of your question, Vice Mayor, too, about November, because something might happen in December, right? Some sort of eviction wave that might not be captured. I think that's what comes into play as well, though, for our direction to them is preventative measures, because they know the landscape and should recognize that evictions are part of that factor. And I think it goes to your comment, Councilman Pacheco, while housing is a factor, the answer doesn't necessarily need to be only Section 8. It could be like protections for tenants, so that like the anti-tenant harassment ordinance is being passed in Los Angeles soon. We could piggyback on that and ensure that people aren't getting harassed out of their homes by landlords. So it could be policy considerations as opposed to building a ton of new buildings, which I know is not something that's supported.
And I think just to dovetail on that as well, I agree that an eviction wave may be something that we're all going to deal with. I think we won't be alone in that. And I know that with this particular firm's breadth of clients, that all are going to be dealing with a similar situation. I think that they're well positioned to help us with some ideas that we can implement here.
Well, that's the way I'm thinking. Thank you to the Homicide Cop Committee. Councilmember Solis, would you like to make a motion?
All right. Trying to find the language for my motion, but I motion to approve with SAR as the contractor and the additional fund
Per staff recommendation.
for staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Yes. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Pacheco,
Yes.
Councilmember Montanez is absent, Vice Mayor Mendoza,
Yes.
and Mayor Balance.
Yes, motion passes. At this time, we're at my favorite part. Item 11, fiscal year 2021-2022 budget study session number 4.
Yes, and thank you, Mayor. And actually, can I request a 5-minute break so I can get things set up and make sure that I can all use the facilities before launching. So, thank you. Have to run.
Julia, I think we're
Thinking the same way.
What are you guys going to present on this? Oh, that's right.
We're still streaming.
What do you mean? Oh, okay. No, it's on Zoom. Oh, is that?
That's right.
I'll be right back. It's on
Thank
Zoom.
you for reminding
It's on
me.
Zoom.
It'll be fine. Okay, so you have to go Wednesday.
Thanks.
Looking out for you. Would you look into that for in terms of whether at the statutory maximum for the fireworks fine, pretty complicated?
Yeah, and I'd say that only because I think they were the ones who opted, because we had just around that time, we recently done it for another client. We spent a lot of time because they were in the same position, they wanted to figure out how we could max it. Let me find the staff report sometime, it doesn't refresh my memory, but I think we're already about the limit of what we're legally allowed to do.
Because if not, there might be support to take that. So
I'll follow up. You want me to get back to you on the next week?
well, yeah, because for July is already previous way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. If I can get back to you soon, I'll.
Moving right along. Okay. I'm trying to put in the 4th of July celebration real quick. Yeah, no, I think I'm good. I saved it to the desktop, so good. It's on the it's this. The printout, the hard copy should be in front of you. There's a hard copy.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I can email it to you too. The only thing is it's going to change. You know, I'm going to work through, but this has all the base numbers.
So that was. Yeah, that's for the, yeah, the data. That sounds like there's a.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was looking at this, the point when Councilman Pacheco was asking, I was going to point.
And a joke, you know, the reason because a lot of times after they're about 30 seconds of shake to get it, it keeps going out.
Yeah.
Shake it.
No, but I'll point actually because this has a pointer button.
to get that pointer working.
Before we into the house, go on. Right, yeah. Yeah, you can carry on. Yeah, not worried about stuff. I don't think it'll be too much, but I'll ask. Yeah, whatever.
Okay, we're back in session and city manager.
Yes,
Go on.
thank you, Mayor. So as you mentioned earlier, this is our fourth budget study session. Two of those study sessions were special study sessions that were devoted entirely to the budget. So this council has really done a good job of evaluating and looking through the budget. We went through each department's proposed work plans and the proposed enhancements. We've taken feedback from city council on additional enhancements, as well as some alternative ways to fund certain enhancements, and we've taken a lot of that into consideration. So what I would like to go through tonight is I do have a spreadsheet that has a number of sheets that we can try to start getting some final direction from council on what to approve in the budget, the proposed budget adoption, which will be on June 21st. So we want to try to get some direction on which enhancements to include and not include in different funding sources to include. So I'm going to share. It's going to be a little bit of an interactive exercise, and I'm going to share a copy of this spreadsheet. Hopefully everyone will be able to see it pretty well. So I do want to, I'm going to go through, there are a few worksheets here. I'm going to try to go through this to really explain what we're looking at here. So as you can see up at the top, this is our reserve balance. And this will all be, this discussion is focused on the general fund. There are not other funds that we have as part of this discussion tonight. I believe all of those are discussed in the capital and operating department. So under the general fund, and city attorney, can you just hit the lights real quick?
That's one job.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we have the, we'll be here all week. So we have the beginning balance is $1.8 million. Sorry, $1.7 million. That's the balance. That's the last audited balance that we have of the fund, of the general fund. That's basically our savings account. We have a goal to be in 20% of our revenues, or our annual expenditures, sorry, which would be just a little over $4 million to be in our savings. So we're about halfway there. We were about halfway there at the end of June of 2020. Then you can see this. I wanted to keep it so that you can kind of tie some of these numbers back to the budget book that is posted online and was also distributed to City Council back in early May. So $22,351,375 is the amount of revenue that was projected and is in the budget book that was provided in May. So this gray box that's right underneath there, that's going to be approved revenue adjustments. So a little later on, we're going to go through some potential revenue adjustments that we could make. They involve somewhat of a policy decision by City Council. So any revenue adjustments that we talk about tonight that are supported by Council will be populated in this gray box, thereby potentially increasing the total amount of revenues available to be appropriated. So if you go down to the next line, proposed budget expenditures, if you take that line, there's 20,091,392 plus the staff proposed enhancements of 2,089,018. That gives us the original, down here on the right, there's an original budget amount, 22,180,410. That is the total general fund appropriation that you will see in your printed proposed budget. So again, that's $20 million in budget expenditures plus the staff proposed enhancements of just over $2 million, which includes 1.7 million in one time and 385,000 in so then, if you look underneath that, right underneath the 20,091,091, so the proposed budget expenditures, you have an expenditure adjustments cleanup. So as we went through the process after staff printed the budget book, we had some additional quality control. Some of the departments, reviewed their budget. There were certain things that we needed to clean up. There were some items that were sort of left out, and we needed to put back in through our labor distribution, and there were other items that we realized we could actually fund through a different funding source. So that's 43,112 in adjustments. So that's a positive, which means that all of those cleanup adjustments serve to increase expenditures from the original budget amount of 22,180, increased it by $43,000. I'll get into the detail of that in a second. I just wanted to go through this summary page. So with the proposed budget expenditures, the adjustments and the cleanup from what was printed of $43,000 and the $2 million in proposed enhancements, that brings us to the total expenditure of $22,223,522. So you can see that the $22,351,000 in revenues minus $22,223,000 in expenditures leaves us with just under $128,000 that is unappropriated, meaning that's available to be appropriated by City Council. Again, this is not, we'll work through a few different proposals here that will change that number, but this is the baseline that we'll start with tonight based on the proposed budget. So, and again, assuming that if nothing changed tonight, then that would increase our beginning balance to about $1.8 million. And again, that's just a preliminary estimate, more for illustration. We still need to go through the audited financial process for the current fiscal year. And then just one last comment, there's this box here, approved council enhancements. It's currently has nothing in it and it's grayed out. So again, we'll go over some policy decisions on the council enhancements tab that will populate that if there are any council enhancements that are supported. So the first place I want to go is I just want to go over where this 43,112 in adjustments came from, so that the council is comfortable with that particular line item. So you can see here, this is the detail, and there's these are the account descriptions, and there's our account, our object, our account codes to the left. We can, you don't need to know that. Basically, all you need to know for these first three, the salary for permanent employees, these 222, 224, and 225 are all in the police department. So basically, when we first put this together, our labor distribution, which shows where our each employee is charged based on what type of work they do. There was some errors in that, so we need to clean that up, make sure people are being charged to the correct divisions based on their workload, and that's this in and out. There's a $89,000 increase here, $77,000 increase here, and a total of $224,000 increase here of funds that were appropriated elsewhere. In this other contractual services, we had originally appropriated $350,000. That actually, I believe that ended up being a little bit of an overestimation. We didn't need that much. It was only $250,000 was the request, so we reduced expenditures by $130,000 in that account. Transfer to facility maintenance. This came out of the discussion for the public works facility and the police facility to make some facility improvements. we did appropriate those in the facility maintenance fund. However, we overlooked that they were going to be transferred from the general fund. And then there would be a corresponding reduction in internal service charges. These are kind of fancy words to use, but the net is that we increased transfers out by 130, but decreased the internal service charges by 100,000. So there's a net increase of expenditures of about $30,000. And again, that's to reflect the enhancement, the staff proposed enhancement request for the police department, facility improvements, and the public works break room facility. So these last two items are actually moving. We're moving funding from for two of the items that were on the staff enhancement list, and they're in the notes here. So note 7 shows you what 7 is. So this $80,000. So originally we had approved, or we had recommended replacement of 2 police vehicles. After the budget, we refined which vehicles those were, and that were most in need. Working with the police department, they're actually patrol vehicles that were purchased around 2014. So we had actually pre-funded a portion of that purchase already. So we're actually able to reduce the $100,000 original appropriation to only $20,000. The reason for that is that the $40,000 that was pre-funded for each vehicle will cover replacement of the vehicle, but not necessarily the equipment that goes with that vehicle, like bars, certain racks. There's other things that need to be equipped in those vehicles. So that $20,000 is still needed to equip the new vehicles. That will be built into the new amortization for these vehicles going forward, so that there'll be sufficient funding in 5 or 6 years when we replace those. But the net impact of that is that we can reduce that that charge to the general fund by $80,000. So that frees up an additional $80,000. And then this last one, transfer to the lighting landscape district. We actually just talked about that earlier tonight. There is no need this year for a subsidy. So we're taking that $40,000 out of that we typically reflect the subsidy the general fund needs to pay. So ultimately, when you do all the math here, add all these changes up, that does result in an increase, a net increase of about $43,000. So that $43,112 again ties into the front page, the general fund budget summary. That's this number here, right under the proposed budget expenditures plus adjustments cleanup. And again, that's where the $171,000 in sort of free additional funds that we had at the very beginning of this process, it is now after those cleanups is $127,000. So that's kind of the baseline we're working with. I want to next go to revenue adjustments, because through this process, we talked about a few different revenue sources and potentially funding some of the proposed enhancements through the American Rescue Plan Act. So what that would do is we would record some of these American Rescue Plan Acts as additional revenue. So we already have the expenditure in the general fund budget, but we don't have any revenue offsetting revenue. What we can do, and if council directs us, there's these purchases. There's 4 purchases here, 4 things that were funded already that we can fund through the American Rescue Plan Act. We'll increase that as a revenue for the next fiscal year, and it will increase the amount of resources available to allocate for other things by the commensurate amount. So I'll just use number 1 here as an example. So number 1, $125,000. You can see down here in the note, it gives a little more detail. That's for the pothole repair trailer for public works. So as we were analyzing the American Rescue Plan Act appropriate expenditures, there are a few things that have been clear. They're still working through some of the guidelines. We still don't have a final number from the state of what our ultimate amount will be. We are fairly confident it's going to be in the $4 million range. But some guidelines have been put out through some other different organizations. One of them is that they won't be appropriate to fund staff or staff costs, new staff or staff costs. What will be appropriate is are a lot of road and infrastructure related improvements. That's something that they're really encouraging. Also, any activities that are sort of technology and network related, especially if you can tie them to, COVID and increasing, accessibility for, touchless and providing services that don't necessarily need to be in person. So we reviewed a lot of the enhancements, and these enhancements really stuck out as things that we're very confident at this point, even though it's early, that we could spend America Rescue Plan funds on. So the first one is the pothole repair trailer for public works. That's $125,000. And actually the dump truck replacement, because that is very much tied to our infrastructure maintenance. It's a critical piece of equipment for maintaining our infrastructure. That also at $100,000 could be funded through the American Rescue Plan. The third amount is funding technology improvements that support touchless or reduced need for in-person services. So on the staff recommended enhancements, we had $50,000 for VoIP, voice over internet protocol, that's upgrading the city's internet, it's not internet, phone system from basically analog to digital. And then there was another allocation for about $75,000 to do an analysis of our network infrastructure and the many things that we need to do to improve that backbone so that we can take credit card payments and network improvements. So again, that was a $75,000 recommended enhancement. So both of those, because they're technology related, we can fund, we're very confident we can fund through the America Rescue Plan. And then lastly, we had included about 3 months of additional facility cleaning, recognizing that we'll continue to, at least through the summer, probably want a higher level of cleaning in our facilities, which we increased during COVID. So that was $28,260. So those 4 items, again, staff is fairly confident that those are appropriate to be funded through the America Rescue Plan. So the policy decision here is whether or not, if council wants to move forward with this, and that means when we get in our first payment of, we're expecting about $2 million probably in the next 30 to 60 days, then we would have to take this $378,000 sort of off the top of that. So we would only be, if we get in $2 million, there would only be, $1,612 available for other efforts, right? So basically, the policy decision is if we support this, you'll be able to free up this funding to fund other enhancements as put out by city council or city staff. But you would be this would be reduced from the America Rescue Plan program that will be coming forward in the next few months. So I think I wanted to stop here just to kind of get some general feedback from council. And you know what, maybe I'll just give you a little preview of what the next part of that is. So if you look at the City Council Enhancement Worksheet, at the very top here, you have the amount available to appropriate. So that's the $127,053 from the first page. Then we have the up-to-date available, the costs for, we have 9 items here that have been discussed. You can see the 4th of July celebration has been added, so this is very real time. There's 9 items that are costs that would represent expenditures that have been discussed, and then there are 2 items that would actually represent reduction of expenditures. So what we'll want to get from council is how much we have, which of these items the council would like to support and bring back into the budget adoption. I would like to first get obviously the total amount available to appropriate. So that's why I first want to see if there is a appetite to, to increase our revenues through the America Rescue Plan. If we, just to kind of give you some numbers, if council approved all 378,000, I'll use 375 because it's easy. and there's about 125 here. You're talking about $500,000 that would be available to appropriate for these city council enhancements. I would also like to go to the next page, which is our staff recommended enhancements. So we had approximately 31 staff recommended enhancements that were in the printed budget. Again, almost all of these are tied to strategic goals and making some forward strides in those strategic goals. Many of these are staff related and not necessarily available to be funded through the America Rescue Plan, but you can see the highlighted areas here are the ones that were staff recommended that probably that take somewhat of a policy decision. So the upgrade to VoIP, again, if council wanted to fund it through America Rescue Plan, we would remove it. We wouldn't necessarily remove it from here, but it would not. That would increase our revenue to pay for that. The PD IT needs assessment and equipment purchase. That is the network infrastructure I was talking about. That would also be eligible for America Rescue Plan funding. The paying down the 2020 deferred debt, that would be a policy decision whether or not to. This is to making a double payment to get back on track with the original debt schedule, as opposed to extending it a year. The 2 patrol vehicles we already moved to be IRF funded, so that expenditure has been reduced through that expenditure cleanup adjustments. And then down here we have the popcorn trailer and the dump truck replacement. Those both are highlighted because they can be funded through America Rescue Plan. So that's basically this spreadsheet, and I hope it's not too confusing. But what I would recommend we do first is really kind of go through, get council's feeling on moving these funding, the funding for these particular items to the America Rescue Plan, because that would then impact this amount available to appropriate, right off the bat. So, Mayor, maybe I can start there, and we can just discuss council's desire.
Consider the opinion here from each of the council members, so we can just go through the budget, each key item. Councilmember Rodriguez.
For this policy question, it came up at our last meeting. My recommendation would be to not allocate the American Rescue Plan funds until there's a full proposal in front of council from the ad hoc. I do believe that these 4 items, if identified as enhancements that can be considered by the American Rescue Plan, then they can be removed from the list and free up those funds to be considered for other enhancements, but then taken to the ad hoc without committing the American Rescue Plan funds in the budget.
That is certainly an option, yeah. So I believe what you're talking about, Councilman Rodriguez, is not necessarily take them, add the revenue from American Rescue Plan, but take these 4 items, reduce them from the staff recommended enhancements. So they're not an expenditure anymore. But then come back and reconsider them as part of the America Rescue Plan. So 3 or 4 months from now.
So our ad hoc to take it, now, right, as in consideration for the full picture that we'd be presenting to council to consider for those funds. And I think that's important because, these 4 items, as you pointed out, could be eligible and important, but in comparison to other things that the council might want to see for those funds, I think it's too premature to decide now those resources. I also have opinions on your other 2 sheets, but is that for a later exercise?
We can. We're open to all opinions at any time. The only thing I wanted to make sure is to see if we could get what an amount,
Then I'll reserve my comments for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't necessarily share that sentiment. I think it's fine to take some of the ARP funds if that's the recommendation of our finance department or our city manager. I do want to say though, because I haven't had much of an opportunity to comment on the budget over the last few sessions. Those that know me know that I'm a quality of life life guy. And knowing that we're in real time here, I think that I have to make my pitch to fund our tree fund to $25,000, same as that we did when we first established it. I think at the risk of sounding like a broken record, we are a tree city here in San Fernando. I think it's important for us to put our money where our mouth is. The best thing we can do to fight climate change, to beautify our city, to help our air quality, to recapture water during storms, etc., is to plant trees. However, I am interested in seeing staff's opinion on whether that should come from the ARP or if it should come from other sources. I'm a bit of an agnostic on that. Otherwise, knowing that in actuality, we're only going to get 1.6 instead of 2 million because we're funding these very important things that go to quality of life, like pothole repair and technology and so forth. I think is important. One other thing, and I think that perhaps this might be something that we discuss in the Green Cities ad hoc or what have you, maybe fund council or whatever it is, but exploring public Wi-Fi in the parks. I don't know if we've necessarily done enough research and diligence to come up with a plan there yet, but knowing that the American Rescue Plan might be available for something like that, I think it's incumbent on us to explore that as well. So two more comments. The bus shelters, I know we discussed during the capital improvement programs. And so I'm happy that council kind of kept that top of mind. And of course, our public works director also including that. So I thank you for that. And finally, and I don't know if this is germane to exactly what we're talking about here, but if there's a cost to opening up our heat shelters, I think we only start them at 100 degrees. It'd be nice to be able to open them up at 95 degrees, or 92 degrees. I don't think we have to wait for triple digit heat in order to kind of offer some relief. But I'll kind of put a pin in the rest of my comments there, but thank you for going ahead and adding the tree funds. And one related item on that, and it's something that I spoke with Mr. Baumgartner very briefly about, is that not only do we need money to plant the trees, we need money to maintain the trees and to water them, which is something that isn't necessarily something that people remember. It's great when the tree goes in, but we also have to remember that it costs money, it costs time, it costs effort to trim the tree, to water the tree, etc. But going back to your original point, Mr. Kimball, I'm okay with it coming from the American Rescue Plan. I do appreciate that we have our ad hoc here willing and able to get into it and vet our expenditures and so forth. But I'm open to hearing more of our council's opinions on that idea and deciding afterwards. So thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Mr. Kimball, when will we revisit the budget again? I know I've asked you this several times.
Sure. Out of normal course of business, we wouldn't revisit the budget until usually the end of February, beginning of March, as part of the mid-year. So we usually wait till we get 6 months of revenues and expenditures to December, and that's typically for minor course adjustments. Typically, I believe this year is going to be somewhat atypical. Last year was obviously very atypical because it was COVID and we had no idea where things were going. I believe this year will be another sort of atypical year in that there may be these other funding sources that we might be able to look at. Sort of, we don't typically have enhancements at mid-year, but we could, we could certainly that could be different. And also, at the end of the day, the budget is sort of a living document in that it can be amended by city council at any time, and it often is throughout the year. Usually, when we get a grant funded, or there's some other some other funding source that's new. So just the process, I think, just to for the public standpoint and for council's information process, when we actually received the America Rescue Plan Act funding, and we discuss some of those programs and bring it to council at that time, which may be, July, August, September, depending on the timing, we would probably most likely with that plan bring a budget amendment. So we would at that time amend the budget to add revenues, expenditures in accordance with whatever plan city council approves. So just for example, Councilmember Rodriguez's idea, if we took these out of the budget for enhancements, but they can't come back in September as an overall plan, then they could be at that point, I would expect that we will do a budget amendment for all of the America Rescue Plan Act funds and appropriate at that time. So, it would be a few months down the road, but at that point we'll know exactly how much we're going to get. We'll have a much better idea of the guidelines and what we can. We have a pretty good idea now, but it's still sort of in development and to a certain extent. So.
Okay, so then also in terms of the trees, just wondering, is there any sort of plan to plant more trees in the city in 21, 22?
I'm going to pass that over to the Worksheet.
Sure. We actually have roughly 500 trees in the plan for the coming year. Some of those are through our partnership with Tree People and highest areas projects. So we have, I believe, around 250 trees plus 250, 300 trees there in certain areas of town. We have an additional 100 to 125 trees as a second phase of the Glen Oaks planting. And staff could probably plant another 100 trees through trees that we would receive from our public services. So I think we would come close to about 500 trees in this coming year.
So the Councilmember Pacheco, the 25,000 would be used for.
Well, we have our fruit tree giveaway that hopefully will start up again. We're give around. Sorry, Roman, turn my back to you. I think we give around 300 or 400 trees away during that event. I've also asked Mr. Venegas to look at our parks, which are obviously a big opportunity to plant more trees, especially as landscape barriers along alleys and along streets and so forth. And again, to also kind of begin to look forward on the maintenance and so forth. But unfortunately, our counterpart, Ms. Montañez, isn't here to also chime in, but there's also some work we can do as far as urban forestry plan, and try to be a little bit, sensible and methodical about where we're going in the future if we have this goal of what we set for 2027.
2,000 additional trees.
Thank you. So in terms of the items here from the America Rescue Plan, regarding the dump truck, I don't want to take funds out of the American Rescue Plan, such as Councilmember Rodriguez mentioned, because I don't want to shortchange the residents and businesses. I want to see what they bring forward. And I think, in terms of the dump truck, it's something that we have been planning to do and that's been needed. That would be an expense from our general fund. But if once they review it, they find that it's something they can take out of there, then by all means. But I don't want to remove it from the budget item. So this is an item that I do support from the regular general fund budget. Also the pothole repair. The technology, maybe it's something that would be considered out of, I would definitely consider, because it was because of COVID, we learned that this is something that's really severely needed for our community. And the COVID-19 cleaning items, that's totally direct, for the American Rescue Plan. So that's how I feel about it. For now, that's all I have right now. Oh, sorry, I may interrupt. I've been having this behind my ear on. I would like to request laptops for council members rather than tablets. Because with COVID, we've had to do these Zoom meetings, and it's the best done with the tablet rather than an iPad. And, you know, I mean, I think that would be best. And we, you know, it would allow us access to Word, prepare documents, or, you know, just responding to emails is so much easier. I think that I just didn't want to spend money on council. That wasn't something I want to do, but I know we do have some tablets that were purchased and for staff, and they since have been returned, so maybe that would be something that we can tap into. For now, that's all we have. Thank you.
I'm going to agree 100% with the Vice Mayor, but I'd like to have a budget item as well. And I don't know if the City Council is aware how much time it takes to be a board member for the Metropolitan Water District. It's at least 5 meetings a month. 3 of those meetings are all-day meetings. And the report you received from Anonymous is a 16-hour interview process. It's like a Friday and a Saturday. And we don't pay our representative. We do pay our representative a stipend for the vector control. And that's 1 meeting. And it certainly isn't an all-day meeting because I was a representative at the time. So I would propose that we set some money up to pay our MWD board representative. How much, that's open for discussion. And I don't remember what we paid our vector control representative for 1 meeting.
I believe it's $125 per month. It's the maximum of that if there's 1 meeting or 2 meetings. I believe vector control is $125 statement.
It's been out of recommend $250 monthly for the meetings. As I said, there's 3 full-day meetings and 2 half-day meetings. And when I talk about full-day, I'm talking about 9 in the morning to possibly 4 o'clock, sometimes 6 o'clock in the evening. Very, very time-consuming. I'm so grateful to Dr. David. He's willing to represent us and do an outstanding job to sit through those very lengthy meetings and provide us with outstanding reports. He's our representative today that I'm talking about. Not today and whoever when he chooses, well, whatever happens. Council will place him at one point, or he chooses to step down and do something else. We should have money set aside for the representative. And right now, he doesn't have to go to the headquarters building because that's another cost, having to drive there and get there by 8 o'clock in the morning. It's just insane. They get stuck in that 4 o'clock traffic. Anyway, that's my proposal. But again, I do Vice Mayor. What do you think?
So I just want to get a little clarity as far as the America Rescue Plan Act. So from what I heard, and please let me know if I didn't hear this correctly, I don't think that there's an overwhelming desire to use America Rescue Plan Act funds now to fund at least the first 2. The first 2 items, which would be the dump truck and the pothole repair. There is an openness to use it to fund the network improvements and the cleaning. However, I don't know if it was clear if that was something that we would sort of approve now, or if it's something that we would kind of initially take out of the budget and then add into the budget if that's part of an overall package. I think that I just wanted to get each council members a little more clarity on, do we want to fund it by adding the revenue and then sort of dedicating those fundings when they do come in, or do we want to hold off on this America Rescue Plan Act, have it all come back as a package?
And this is my concern.
Yeah.
My concern is I support all those 4 items. And I know you're saying if we can identify these 4 items and those dollars we could use in the budget to kind of play around with the fireworks. More money to fireworks. But it just, I want to make sure that our public works guys get the dump truck. They need that dump truck. Message received. The fun house and the trailer, very, very important.
Yeah, please. So, hearing council's comments, I think that we can move forward with the American Rescue Plan set aside for number 3 and 4, because there's clearly a COVID connection and benefit to the community through those dollars with their intention. And wanted to be returned to the enhancement list for review in your next exercise.
But if I may, Mr. Kimball, you did, it's pretty much your understanding that number 1 and number 2 would qualify for American Rescue.
Sure, it's my understanding that they qualify. And I don't want to put words in Councilmember Rodriguez's mouth. I don't think she's saying that we don't need them. I think she was just saying the idea is to,
there is a nexus, though. I want to be clear that there's a nexus.
Sure, yes, because American Rescue Plan really supports infrastructure improvements. And so these are both related to infrastructure improvement for maintenance. So that's one of the emphasis, is that correct? Yeah, one of the emphasis of expenditures on American Rescue Plan. So, we're fairly confident that there's definitely a nexus. It's just whether or not this is what you want to use the funds for, or some other support. So ultimately, this could be part of that package, that comes forward. Obviously, that'll be discussed in an ad hoc by City Council. I think it's just a matter of whether or not that gets locked in now, or you wait to go through the process to weigh it out with the other programs that may be competing for those same funds.
We're doing it now, but I don't know if there's support for.
And it sounds like the compromise that's sort of being talked about here is.
See, I'm going to move it to the Councilmember Pacheco and say, I just worry so much about this that I'm willing to say, yes, let's do it now. Because I just worry about something going wrong. We'll say, okay, we'll put it over here, but maybe it'll go into the American Rescue Plan. Maybe it won't.
So I think and again, I don't want to put my words in the Councilman Rodriguez's mouth. I don't think, it sounds like sort of the compromise that was being discussed is still keep items 1 and 2 in the enhancement sheet, to be funded through general fund dollars initially. So not necessarily tying up for those 2 items, and then we can have 3 and 4. We'd fund those now through the American Rescue Plan Act. What we can always do is, if ultimately it decides that we want 1 and 2, the $225,000 to be part of the American Rescue Fund Act, we can always do a budget adjustment to basically move those from the general fund to American Rescue Plan. And then at that point, we can select something else that's $225,000 from the council enhancement list to fund, in September. Like when that month funding becomes free, we could make that decision at that point. So I guess it sounds like I encapsulated Councilmember Rodriguez's initial. So it's not saying we'd still fund those 2 things. We'd still move forward potentially with those 2 purchases. It would just be after the fact. We can always kind of reimburse ourselves for those, as long as it's within, the same.
So it's not like we're waiting until November to buy the dump truck. We could get it because
we would still move forward as soon as it's funded. We would it's just an accounting adjustment on where it's funded from. And then if that's part of the plan, we free that up to then fund something else. So that we can make that decision. Council can make that decision at that point.
So I guess we all agree that we want the dump truck and we want the pothole?
Absolutely.
So, okay, so then those are good. I think we're all good with that. And then the other two items from the batch.
So that seems like a fair compromise, what we have up on the screen. Okay, so what that does, just to go back here, is that would add $150,000 to revenues. So that brings it up to about $280,000 that's available for to be allocated towards some of those other items. So I can go back to city council enhancements. So I just want to make sure before we get to talking about these items.
Nick, I want to ask you, actually, the way I understood council was, Rodriguez. This is a little bit of a concern. So the ad hoc committee will make the decision to recommend whether or not to have the dump truck and the other item to city council as part of the American Rescue Plan staff. Am I interpreting what you said correctly?
Yeah, taking all of their programs or projects suggested into consideration.
I think those two are probably given, and then the rest to be TBD. But these two are well.
So, and I just want to be clear, unless the only way we will still, unless the dump truck and the pothole patching vehicle came out of the enhancement request and reduced this $225,000 expenditure, we'd still move forward on those two. It would just be whether or not ultimately those are reimbursed and made available for other purposes. The general fund made available for other purposes when we come back, assuming that was part of the package. If it's not, if there are not other things the council would rather spend. So again, what that does is now make this amount to available to appropriate. It brings it up to $280,000. So before we kind of discuss these, I think we've talked about all of these, and council's pretty much aware of what the proposal is for all of these. The two items that would further increase the amount available to appropriate are these two items that have been discussed a little bit, but I do want to provide an additional. I want to maybe talk about these items first. So reduce the catch-up payment for the retirement fund. So each year we have a debt service schedule. There was I think it was a 30-year repayment of some prior funds that were spent out of the retirement fund that were later found out that they shouldn't have been spent on those particular purposes. That was for parts of our fire contract and for retiree health benefits, which those were determined that they shouldn't have been spent on those particular items. And at the time, again, this was a few years ago, council made a policy decision to first of all stop that practice and fix that moving forward. So we no longer use special retirement funds to pay for those two items. And then second, to go back for the previous 5 years and repay the retirement fund what was spent out of the retirement fund that should have otherwise been spent out of the general fund. So that, and then there was a debt service schedule that to repay that over a 30-year period at a relatively low interest rate to the retirement fund. So as we discussed, I think in our last budget study session, part of the package to deal with the COVID-19 emergency and the significant impact we expected it to have on our finances, we, the council and staff worked together. And one of the purposes was one of the ideas was to defer 1 year of payment. So basically, there's a 30-year repayment schedule. We would not pay year 5 and we would add a 31st year. That was the decision that was sort of made last year in order to kind of save some funds, keep liquid cash in hand. As we sort of talked about a few times, because of we actually weren't as nearly as impacted as we had originally thought, and most cities originally thought, mostly because we don't rely on tourism and some of these other industries that were very significantly hit. So we are in a position that we, and this was part of the staff recommended enhancements, that we actually make a double payment this year. So pay what we normally would have paid pursuant to our debt schedule, but then make a catch-up payment. So we get back on that schedule to repay in 30 years, not 31 years. Time value of money, if you pay it off now, it's worth more than paying it off in 30 years or 25 years from now. Same idea on the reduced catch-up payment to water and sewer fund. There was that's an internal loan that the general fund took from the water and sewer loan for some improvements at Las Palmas. I believe that one's pretty close to being paid off. There's only a few years left on that. But we did the same thing. We deferred that last year, or in this current year, to save some cash, some capital. We're recommending we catch up that payment to get back on the original debt service schedule, pay that off quicker. That is not a legally required payment. It's a policy decision. So council may say, we don't want to get back on the original debt service schedule. We want to continue to defer that payment, and then you can use that to fund some of the other cost-based expenditures, or council may want to get back and pay that debt off quicker, or in the time period it was originally contemplated, and then those funds would still stay there and not necessarily freed up to fund some of these enhancement requests. So I think I want to get the council's kind of thoughts on where they are on these debt payments, so that we'll have a good idea of how much we have available to distribute.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Are we gonna have to go line item here by each one to try to make the numbers work? I mean, I would like to know which one of these might be available under the American Rescue Plan, for instance. Obviously, if we have 865, we only have 280. That's 600,000 that we can't fund, right? Is that pretty much what it is in a nutshell?
Yes, that's it in a nutshell. Some of the things we probably can fund through American Rescue Plan. Laptops for city council. There's definitely, because of all of the virtual meetings you're now doing, there's definitely a nexus there. We can't fund any staffing. That's made pretty clear, especially ongoing staffing. Many of these positions, 1, 2, 3, are all definitely staffing for. That could be some professional services, but that's staffing. The economic development master plan. I think we would just need more information. I don't know about an environmental justice element. These are plans. I don't know, quite frankly, how much the planning is kind of looked on, unless it's an emergency, like emergency operations plan. That those type of plans are most likely appropriate. And then some of these other things, interior paint, the 4th of July celebration, I don't think would necessarily be American Rescue Plan eligible.
Okay, I mean, if it's helpful, for me personally, I can go and say which one is for, or I don't know how we want to do this, but number one, I think it's critical to have this assistant grant writer position. Number two, I think it's critical, but I don't think it's critical for this budget. I think we can hold off on that. It's coming a little expensive from what I was expecting. Number three, I think we can afford. Number four, same. I think perhaps this is something we either break up between the budgets or consider, next year's. For number five, I'm going to have to hear a little bit more from council and from staff on. I'm not entirely sure. Number six, I appreciate the leadership we can show on this, but that's also very, very expensive, and it's something that a lot of cities aren't even touching yet. And I appreciate that we would be one of the first to kind of break. I think maybe Sacramento has done one, but that's just, I don't think we can afford it. 7, if we're going to continue doing Zooms and such, I think we need it, $2,500. 8, I'll just defer to council maybe. I was probably hoping we could do the outside, not so much the inside. Outside, that's a little dirty, but It is what it is. 4th of July, I think, maybe just put a pin in that for now, and I support it. I don't know if we can get it this time right now, maybe, I hope so. Obviously, number 10, 100% support. 11, I'm good with, and I'm okay trading in my iPad, I guess, if that helps. I don't know if that helps monetary or not. I do think we need a stipend for a representative. I think we need a stipend for all our representatives. If there's anyone still working for free, I would like to know so that we don't, I think that's just common courtesy, and we're asking these folks to do so. And then these last two here, are these the amount that we normally pay, or is this like a reduced amount that you kind of felt comfortable putting in there?
That's the amount we normally
That's the
pay.
amount. And I'm totally okay with not skipping those because, unfortunately, we've been paying the cost of bad decisions for a long time, and right now, it's getting to be old hat for me personally. So I'm totally okay with that. So there you have it for me, and I'm totally open to hearing, my colleagues about more. So.
And I highlighted the two amounts there because the 5,000 and the 2,500 both again very much related to COVID-19 with the upgrade camera in city council chambers. There is legislation out there that would require us to continue to have sort of virtual options, and that there's definitely a nexus to COVID-19. I think the same thing with the laptop. So we could, for a relatively small amount, we could maybe add these to the revenue. I mean, it's only $7,500 if that's, and then we wouldn't have to necessarily consider them here.
Have we looked at whether any of the staff requested enhancements might fall under the?
Yeah, the staff, staffing is
not the staff hours, but like all the other things that we requested, like wasn't there a page here of like staff requested?
Yes,
enhancements?
let's go to that.
I mean, because if we can draw from that and put that, to the ARP, I don't know which of these, if any.
Yeah, so most of these we look through, and a lot of them very much are related to like staffing. This is another one, the commercial folding machine for payroll and water. I mean, it's replacing something we already have, so it's not like an added service. We did look at all these through that lens. Unfortunately, most of this is either training or staffing. So the highlighted ones were really the ones that we felt the most comfortable with having a strong nexus.
And how about that general fund count with that 26? That's a big number, and sidewalk and stuff.
Yeah, so that's the amount. Earlier, I believe there was the question from council: how much is of Measure SF is in the slurry seal amount? So that's the 500,000. That's we added. So that's part of the 3 million that we would use toward that's being proposed to use for slurry seal. Again, we can be played with. That can be reduced.
But that can't come from ARP.
So I think we would need to look into. Again, it could. Right, it probably could, but I think that's part of the whole. I mean, that would eat up, 25% of our first allocation. So
yeah, it's large number.
So we could certainly do that, and that might be the thing that comes as part of the bigger package.
Thank you for all this whole time for discussion.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you. First, I just want to say that I believe that the council's proposals for enhancement are at least on equal footing to staff's proposals for advancement. So this exercise to only rank our priorities against each other and not the whole package of enhancements seems like not the right way to approach this.
Okay. I mean, I think if there are certain enhancements, I think I would just suggest, and that's fine. Obviously, that's why we put out the listed enhancements. I think I want feedback to make sure that council, is comfortable with that. So that's, so we can certainly, if there are enhancements here that we want to remove,
Or that are the priority, like the same exercise. Which of these are the priorities for council to approve?
Yes, we can do that.
So
a lot more.
So perhaps that could be part of the exercise this evening.
Sure.
Go through this list. Because I also think it's an opportunity for staff to articulate some of the questions that have been raised in prior budget sessions that have not been answered yet, like specific tangible results for residents. When we put forth these enhancements, what are they going to see from that? And that those questions haven't been answered yet.
Sure. So what I would encourage is maybe anything on this list that is a lower priority for council members. You know,
Why would we go lower when on the other hand we did higher?
just because I'm just thinking, what are things that council is not supportive of on this list? Would be what I would recommend, or we could do higher priorities and then, you know, again, all of this is definitely on the table.
Yeah, I just recommend sticking to the same plan of prioritizing things. Because I think you're putting council in a position to have to deny things that obviously are enhancements, but if we're prioritizing, then we're prioritizing. And it's all of the enhancements.
Sure. So let's start. I'm fine. I guess I'm just open to any thoughts on how we go through that exercise.
So I think we can, to the mayor's point, I was, starting, we can complete the council enhancements priority list that we've just begun, and then perhaps staff can walk us through each of the lines for the other enhancements recommended, so then we can prioritize that list. And with that in mind, there's a bigger allocation that we're deciding priorities for, because right now the assumption is that that's already allocated, and that's not necessarily the case.
Right. So anytime that we reduce any of these, that will go back into the available allocation. So for example, if planning intern is desired, we put that at 0, that will go back into sort of that allocation that's available for allocating.
Yeah, you understand, for the way you presented it, it's already not included in the expenditures for the council items. These are included, so they're already budgeted items.
So they're included. They're included here. So they're not. They're included in this this breakout. They're not included in this breakout. They're included in this. So, and I think from a staff recommendation, so we did talk about each and all of these were presented for when each department did their items. So
yeah, I'm just thinking if there's any clarification needed.
Sure.
Or council prioritize.
Yes.
The same exercise should be applied.
Yeah. So do you want to start? Do you want to go back to this and then we can go through the stuff?
Yeah. Sure. So I think that I'm supportive of everyone's recommendations for enhancement. I do think there's a couple of items that we should consider putting on hold until an actual plan is developed. The grant writer is obviously really important to secure additional funds in the future for the city. I believe the economic development housing manager is also really valuable to plan for the future of the city. The paid intern program, I completely agree that we should pay people $20 an hour at the very least. Can you confirm for me though, how much we're paying people like our own staff on recreation community services? Like if we're not paying them a living wage, but we're going to be paying intern, I'm just wondering what's the difference? Because the original proposal was $15 an hour, right?
Yeah. So basically our rec staff, our cadets, our junior cadets, those very entry level, typically someone that doesn't have a college degree or they're more entry level. A lot of people are working toward a college degree in those jobs are at the minimum wage at $15 an hour. So it's mostly rec specialists and I believe junior cadet and some of the other part time. It's part time positions.
Okay.
I think those are the only two.
So to reaffirm some of the conversation in previous sessions, you all are committed to prioritizing our own staff to pursue these internship positions.
Yes, sure. So yes, we want everyone that is now. That being said, obviously we're going to hire whoever can help us the most and is the best fit for it. But we certainly will be advertising and encouraging our existing staff. There is one of the problems with the existing staff is that they may not be able to do both. If they have a rec specialist job and a paid internship, they may not be able to do both because there's only under PERS rules. Once you work over 960 hours in a year, you can no longer, then we have to start paying when retire. but we could certainly work with them to schedule it.
Yeah, and I imagine some people will want to take that opportunity to be paid by the more per hour and an opportunity to advance. Because even in the recommendations for recreation community services, I think they're excellent, and I'm really glad that you're looking out for staff in elevated positions. But from what I understood, none of those are being offered as new positions and opportunities for advancement for the rec leaders. And I think that anytime we can build our own pipeline to provide opportunities for people to advance and be the future leaders of our city, we should do that. The community development staffing flexibility, that again, I think there needs to be more planning and an opportunity for our new staff members leading that team to decide what's best for them. So I would like to hold on that until there's more of a plan and information. The economic development master plan, I'm also supportive of, because our own planning commission has requested it, and out of respect for their recommendation, which was a unified yes vote, I'm supportive of that. The Fund for Environmental Justice element, I think is a great opportunity for the city to step forward and be a leader in this space. Upgrading the camera and council chambers and the laptops, I agree. I think that's tied a lot to the city going online and the importance of that because of what we just saw during the pandemic. It could be part of the American Rescue Plan. The pay for city chambers, I'm supportive of. I had mentioned before, I do agree that, a little can go a long way. Obviously, the 4th of July celebration, the fact is that the reason we have money to do enhancements is because our own residents have decided to tax themselves to the maximum available. And through Measure SF, I believe we should give back to our own community through the 4th of July celebration at the very least and at the starting point. The tree fund, obviously, I think we have a council that's very excited and going to move forward with making us a total tree canopy city, and I'm incredibly excited about it. However, because what was presented today is that we have 500 trees available, and I believe multiple avenues for getting grant funds to secure this. When we're stretching these dollars, I don't think that's necessary now. But I am interested in the Green City ad hoc coming up with a plan for where those funds could go and where they could be leveraged from. The stipend of the representative, it was mentioned that there's some other representatives that are not being paid, some are being paid. I think that requires more of an evaluation about what is currently happening so that we can make a policy decision about how that's going to function for everyone who's representing the city. So I would pause on that until there's additional information and recommendation from staff. And then for the last two, I would not recommend deferring any payments. I think that was the mistake. It was a mistake previously, and we shouldn't continue to fall into that. And then, of course, I look forward to that evaluating the other uses. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, for myself here for the, you'll have to guide me, Nick. I may come out of order because I really can't see the what you have up on the wall. But I do support the grant writer analyst, economic development housing manager, the paid intern, $20 an hour, and I would like to hold off on anything on number 4. So we have more of an idea of what the needs are. I don't support a master plan at this time. We have several plans that we're reviewing, and we would like to focus on those and see what they come up with before we consider anything in the master plan. Environmental justice, I would like to hold on that as well because I know that they're addressing that in the general plan, the housing element, and I'd like to see what they come up with. But I do think this is something important that we can look at in the future, but we look at it later on, when maybe mid-budget possibly, I'm not sure. The camera for chambers, yes. I thought we were going to paint the outside too. I know. You put how many?
Yeah, the quote, just for the quote to, I believe facilities got a quote and it's about $25,000 to do the outside, right? Because I think it was 25,000 this facility, 25,000 public works across the street and 25,000, because it was close to 80,000 for 3 buildings. So the outside was about 20.
Well, you know, I like it, but I mean, it's not anything that's urgent. Maybe we can look at it mid-year and see how our budget's coming in. Pay our debts, definitely for both items. Fireworks, yes. Laptops, yes. MWD, I support the stipend for the rep because they do put a lot of time. And the trees, I wholeheartedly support the trees, but the 25,000 again is there additional funding that's needed to take care of the trees as a council member budget mentioned?
So
How do we cure?
I think additional tree funding is always needed. I mean, we do certainly have some challenges with ongoing maintenance. I think that's probably the biggest area. You know, as we plant these trees, you know, I think that's the recognition that, you know, once a tree is there, we do need to prune it, we need to water it to make sure it gets established for the first 5 years. But I'm gonna let Matt talk to this one because he's much of an expert.
Sure, I did some back of the envelope kind of calcs on what we would need. You know, if we were going to be planting 500 trees a year, the best way to go about handling the watering is to actually install water baths, and those actually aren't very cheap. If you want to put in 2 bags per tree, it's $20 per tree. So you got $10,000 out there. And what that gives you is it doesn't require staff to go back as often. So if you put 2 bags there, you can come along and water that one tree and come back 2 weeks later and water that tree. So it's kind of opens up a little bit of time for staff. I think it's money well spent when you do that. So about $10,000 for you know, if you're going to install 500 new trees, if you do that. Now, with our Calles Verdes project with tree people, we do have usually an agreement with those homeowners that they go out there and water the tree. But I think, as Nick was alluding to, the establishment period can be 2, 3, 5 years. And so to rely on somebody to come out and do that, you know, that might fall by the wayside as they become busy with other things in their lives. So I think it's still coming upon the staff to come along and make sure that those trees are being watered. So yeah, I mean that $25,000 can go towards a great deal of maintenance during the year for a worker to come by, and there's still quite a bit of time. I would estimate probably close to one part-time worker for a year could spend his time, her time watering trees, mulching, trimming, doing other types of maintenance for the trees. So the $25,000 would pretty easily go towards staff time and, you know, water baths, mulching, things like that.
You know, this is something that I can support. You know, and then once we have, I maybe like temporarily I can support it right now, because I know there's a lot of the trees that are not doing very well. They've got a bunch of little you know, like branches starting from the bottom that need to be addressed. It just makes it look really tacky. It doesn't, you know, it's not a pretty sight. So this is something I can consider. And I think that's it. Is that it?
The stipend, I think you already.
Stipend, yes.
For MWD.
And then the catch-up
Oh,
payments.
yes, yes, definitely.
Well,
You want to keep those, not eliminate those, correct?
Yeah, we want to do that.
Okay.
There's no debt. It's not a debt. Right?
it is,
Yeah, it's a payable, it's a debt
To ourselves.
to ourselves, to our internal fund, so it's not like a third party. It is carried as a debt on our balance sheet.
Okay, that's it's some agreement with the Yeah. This didn't catch it. And I'm sorry, I'm playing the water. And did you put the vice mayor in there? Or?
So that was just that's the only supporting that we wouldn't make the payment. So this agent,
I see what you
yeah.
mean. Okay.
That this is who supports moving it from this column to this column.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I definitely want to pay it as soon as we can. The grant writer support 100%. I think that was a great idea, and I think the council was a great, she came up with that. Really good. The economic development housing manager, I think that's very key. The paid intern program, and we are looking for interns that are at the university level, correct? Okay, so that's part of the criteria. And I do not support the community development person at this point. I don't support economic development master plan. And one of the things that I like, Nick, could you give us a list of all these different plans that are lying around the city that need to be addressed and revisited? I do not support the environmental justice element. I need more information, and I want to know specifically what are you talking about when you talk about environmental justice element. I need more information. I do support the upgrade of the camera and the city council, and I do support the interior painting in the chamber. I would like us to think about next budget year, painting all three buildings on the outside, especially on the outside. So, of course, the stipend is a yes for me.
So I
Treatment is a yes for me. From July, that is a yes.
So I believe that that's all of them. So let me go through and move things. Everything that has at least three initials next to it, I will move to the right.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I had recalled at the last session that you were gonna bring back information about the environmental justice element.
Yeah, it was cost information. So I've reached out to the housing element, the project manager, managing firm for the project for the housing element, actually is working with there's a subcontractor that's doing EIR for the housing element. So he did reach out to her and talk to her about what an estimated cost process would be for an environmental justice element to actually right now, what we're doing are in the state law requires that if you're touching two elements, that you do either so we are touching two elements. We're touching the housing element and we're touching the safety element. Those are both need to be updated as part of this housing element process. So the state law is that you have to either prepare an environmental justice element or include environmental justice policies in the elements that you're updating. So we will be including environmental justice policies in both the safety element and the housing element. What he provided me is that $150,000 what it would be to enhance the effort from just policies in those two elements to now creating a standalone housing environmental justice element, which we are not required to do yet. But what they did say is there will be some synergy, when we do, either if we prepare it now or we do it in the future, those policies of the housing element and of the safety element will then be able to be incorporated to an environmental justice element. So that's the information I kind of got back.
Thank you for that additional information. May I make one more question? I was wondering for the master plan, could you articulate what the planning commission had in mind for that? Because from my understanding, I know that there's been a lot of comments about we have too many plans, and I completely agree. There's a lot of plans going on. From my understanding, a master plan would be an actual plan to incorporate all those plans, because right now, all of those plans are disjointed. And this is an opportunity to look at the parking plan, safe and active streets, even the housing element, to figure out what are we doing in our like downtown corridor, which as we've learned in COVID, right, like our local business is like fundamental to our local economy. And so this is an opportunity to combine all those elements to produce a full and robust plan for our community.
Sure. Typically, what an environmental and economic development master plan, the way they didn't go into a lot of detail in the planning commission on exactly what that means. They talked about a plan, an economic development plan that would be more detailed than than specific plan 5. Specific plan 5 creates all of the uses that are allowed in the downtown area, but it doesn't say, parking lot 3 is designated for this particular, grocery store. This, or it doesn't say exactly what, is preferred at each site. What it seemed like the planning commission was looking for is how do we get more information on the particular preference for what gets developed in each of the downtown city lots. So one of the things, that we did, we have prepared the opportunity sites, downtown opportunity sites that went through an economic analysis of what the market would support, what type of development the market would support in any of those. There are definitely a number of different efforts out there that we currently have going. There's this SP5, there's the plans that you had just referenced. There is the economic development opportunity sites that we had the Cosmo companies prepared for us there, and then there's the current outreach effort by the Zor Development to get some data on what people prefer to see downtown, why they come to downtown, what they'd like to see in the future of downtown. So, all of those pieces kind of are typical pieces you would see in an economic development master plan. If the idea was to then kind of do some of those over again, we could get it all into one sort of master plan, but it would require doing a lot of those pieces sort of over again.
Understood. So this is like a separate effort, is what you're saying. Because I'm wondering,
Yeah.
where do all these plans come together? If not this, is it our new economic development director? Is it who's doing it?
Well, typically that would be through city manager's office and the community development director's office. So, we just haven't had sort of quite frankly, having a point person that's economic development focused is probably worth more than creating another plan, because again, there's the creating a plan and there's the implementing a plan, right? And similar to what we talked about the homeless plan earlier, if we don't have a plan to implement the plan, then it will just sit on a shelf. So an economic development manager would actually be some person that can get all of those plans together, and that would be their job, would be to outreach to existing businesses, liaison with existing businesses, talk to the stakeholder groups and implement what's in SP5, implement what's in the downtown opportunity sites, talk about what's in the, what's coming down the road with Metro and how that, the TOD kind of fits in the safe and active streets and all that. So having someone, a position that's dedicated, 2,000 hours a year, that's what they do, as opposed to right now where it's like a very small piece of the community development director's job and my job, that I just can't focus on that every day. That would be probably a big good expenditure.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Oh, so let me move these over real quick.
Are you pretty set on that salary? I mean, is that something that we can offer $100,000 for, or is that?
So if you offer 100, it's about, for an economic development manager, for any manager, mid-level manager, if you're 100 to 120,000, then you have to pay, well, $100,000 is going to cost us $150,000 because there's, about $20,000 in benefits for insurance benefits, and then you're probably looking at another $30,000 in PERS benefit. So that's the fully burdened cost.
And I'm not ignoring the two highlighted, the laptops in the upgrade for the city council camera did seem to have some good support. What I would suggest is that we actually add them here, and then this would just be around 160,000, because they're relatively small. So if I can put, I think it was 7,500. Okay, so I believe that that looks like where we okay. So I think right here it shows. So now we had 388,000. That last amount didn't. I don't think it was but let me go back to this current page. So now we have approved revenue adjustments of an additional 160,000 through ARP, which would be 22,500,000 in total revenue. We still have the base of $20 million in expenditures. We have 43,000 in adjustments, $2 million in staff approved enhancements. We'll go to that next. We have 388,000 in city council enhancements. So that leaves us with just under $100,000 in sort of what we would need to kind of make up cuts that we could look at on the reductions in the staffing recommendations. So does that make sense to everyone? So I think at this point we would just need to look at and
The dump truck's $100,000. Do with the ARP, right? I mean, we could go line item, obviously, I wouldn't expect it this time, but that was something we did already talk about.
Question.
sorry, I'm just go ahead. I'm just looking at some items here that might work, but go ahead.
So my question is, at the beginning you mentioned kind of like what our savings balance was, and it's almost $1.8 million. You said that our goal is to get to $4 million. It's not right now. If we're church with 100,000, that means we're all things equal, we're not contributing more to that effort to get to 4 million. What has been practiced? What's the plan to achieve 4 million? Like, does there need to be some policy decisions that we are always contributing something to finally get to that number? Because right now this would be just balance, like
Sure.
no contribution to our savings.
Yeah, so I think there are two factors right now. So we do have 1.7 million, and if we spend all of our funds, then we're not contributing. What I do want to indicate is that this does not take in this savings account does not, or this reserve amount doesn't take into account how we're going to finish this current fiscal year. And you know, Diego and his team have done sort of a preliminary assessment based on that. We still have 2 more months of revenues to receive that will be earned in this fiscal year. But we're looking at, you know, a surplus in this fiscal year in the range of, you know, say $500,000 to $1 million because our revenues did do very well.
So higher than projected?
Yeah, higher, in excess of what our expenditures were. So basically that would be added to this, this savings account number. So We do expect there to be a surplus this year that will get us much closer to that $4 million. I do also want to identify, and this came up a little as part of the discussion that we had last budget, during the last budget discussion with, salary savings, or, we budget the full 150,000 for a certain position, but we may not necessarily spend it because it will take take a few months to fill that position. So typically in a given year, there is turnover. There are some salary savings every year. So because we budget the full position, if there are any, which is, that ultimately would be the cost in any year. If there are any savings, that goes to that would go back into that savings account, that general fund savings account. So as opposed to if we only budget for the 3/4 of, so, and that also gives us some flexibility if certain revenues don't come in, but they should have been, there's a little bit of wiggle room there, like plus or minus. There's a error, margin of error. Whereas if we say I'm only going to budget 3/4 of this position because I think it's only going to be filled for 3/4 of a year, there's effectively no more margin of error. So if there is any revenues that come in low, then we're going to dip into that savings account. So do we have a policy? Is it best practice to kind of set aside? I mean, yeah, I think that would probably be a good idea to have there be some little excess of revenues over expenditures. We don't necessarily have a policy. We have a balanced budget policy. So we need to balance our budget. It is a policy decision if we want to have a little bit extra in there so that we can either, so that we add to that ultimately what our savings account is. I do want to say that we are very confident that there is a surplus in this current year that will, increase this savings and get us close to that.
So the other information, in that same vein, isn't there additional funds available so that perhaps other enhancements are available? If you just estimated at $1 to $1.5 million, that's a lot. That's not being projected as revenue for this sheet.
It's not, no, because really that would have been, that was kind of like last year's budgeting, right? We're not going to know that. We're not going to know exactly what the surplus is going to be until September. And then because it takes a while for us to get through the revenue. So in September, I can give you a good number. It was $1 million or $750,000. Right now, we still have 2 or 3 months of sales tax that we still need to get in. So at that point, I think it's probably the same time the ARP will come back. We'll have a much better financial picture of exactly what we have in our savings account. And if there are additional, we just wouldn't necessarily want to commit to something now and then have to come back out.
So then the exercise to go through the proposed enhancements from staff, at that point, if some things are not picked up for this year, that could contribute to reaching this goal for our savings to have a healthy reserve.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, I'd like to propose maybe the idea of having Mr. Kimball and staff go through these enhancements first, come up with a good idea of what maybe, instead of us trying to say, oh, let's take this off, let's take that. We have a good idea as far as our enhancements, but as far as staff's enhancements, I feel like you have a really good understanding, and I want to put you on the spot, you're going through, seeing what you can do. When next time you can come in and say, actually, bang, 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 we can do that, put a little bit more color on these ideas you're talking to Mr. Rodriguez about in terms of surplus, et cetera. That's just an idea.
Yeah, I think,
And Nick, before you answer this question, what are we going to be doing in June 21st meeting? This is really important what we're doing here today.
Yes, it is important to, because I want to have direction so that when we come back on June 21st, we have, a somewhat, I mean, obviously there's still additional discussion that can be had on the 21st, and there's a public hearing. But I'd like at least be able to present a balanced budget at the 21st meeting that has all of the council enhancements that are supported by council. It doesn't have, if there are some things that we can take out of the The staff recommended enhancements, look at other ways to fund certain things. I'd like to, I'd like to have that presented and have some good feedback from, I'd like to have a really strong, document going into June 21st. So we're not, necessarily going into, okay, so the shall be moving things around on that date. I can certainly, I think if there are we could, there are a number of things that we could, saving the 100,000 is pretty easy.
On the grant, it's nothing, we're gonna get it in surplus, and we're just trying to navigate this right now, that's kind of like the feeling I'm getting.
Well, yeah, I think I think we can easily recommend moving around some of these enhancements that we can still meet what the council's goals are, understanding that there's these additional items that council approved tonight or supported tonight. Again, maybe if you give me a 5-minute break, I can just talk to some of the council members and we can get it, some of the staff, and we can just get it pretty easy. Here's $100,000.
That sounds really fair, but I do like the council member to check the dump trucks. That can go into the American Rescue Plan, and then we're done with this. Vice Mayor would like to say something.
I'm sorry that I missed what you were saying. I didn't get it. So we only need like, what is it, 99,000.
99,000.
99,000, right? Well, I support staff's enhancements. I them and I support all of them. And I would be okay if it's 100,000 to American Rescue.
So if I may, let me ask Matt, which one would be more valuable to move forward with quicker, the dump truck or the pothole trailer?
The dump truck.
Okay, that's what I figured he was going to say. Because I think what I would recommend is that we, for the purposes of this exercise tonight, if council did want to move something to the America Rescue Plan, we can, at least for now, I would almost take off the pothole repair for now because we are investing so much in the slurry seal. So, in going through that plan, so I would almost recommend that we, for now, take off the 125,000 for the pothole repair trailer. Not necessarily fund it through American Rescue Plan, but we take it off of the enhancements from requests from city staff, and then we can look at it again through the America Rescue Plan lens. We can hold off on that purchase for a bit. That's probably the least impactful one. That gives us the 100,000 plus some wiggle room. That would probably be, I think, our initial proposal that would fix.
Have 3 council members that support that.
I support that, yes.
Okay. Let me do that right now. Hold on 1 second. And there we go. So fixed. And I think what we can do is, I think the pothole trailer can have we may be able to find, even if it's not America Rescue Plan Act, there may be other funding sources that we can work through to, maybe the grant writer can find us a grant. Yeah, if that's the quick and easy. So I appreciate actually that discussion. It was robust and probably a little confusing, but I think we were able to come to a good place where we got a lot of the council requested enhancements. We moved a little bit of the ARP funds, and we were able to reduce some of the staff recommended that were on that we can look to fund some of. So thank you.
So next, the meeting of the 21st, public hearing.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll include all of these items in all of these adjustments will be included in what Diego is going to be presenting as changes to the adopted budget. So all those items will be included in there when we come back on the 21st.
Okay, that sounds good. So, thank you very much, Nick. That was a lot of work. Thank you, council members. Discussion. Here's budget session. So at this time, we'll move on to staff communications, including commission updates.
Thank you. Let's start with Ms. Fritz.
And city council members, I just wanted to read a correspondence update from the city of San Fernando Library. Good evening, City Council. I would like to provide a few updates about the library this summer. Kids and teens 18 and under can pick up not one, but 2 free nutritious meals starting this year. We're offering refillable lunch and breakfast. Meals are available for no contact pickup on a first come, first served basis from 12 to 1 p.m. June 14th through August 6th, Monday through Friday. There are no restrictions on family income. Parents and caregivers can pick up on behalf of children, kids, and teens that don't need to be present, but are welcome. For more information and for a list of participating libraries, please visit lacountylibrary.org/summer lunch. And that's all the updates I have.
Thank you, Matt.
Yes, just real quick, another update on Safe and Active Streets. We did complete all of our audits, the walking audits, 6 walking audits and 2 bike audits last week. And now we're moving on to more meetings, planning for community engagement, and starting to work up and sharing how we're going to share the plan with the community. I know that there's a plan for us to table the consultant to table at the pop-up event in June at the mall. So there'll be an opportunity for some more interaction with the community, start sharing some of the ideas what we picked up through the initial phases. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you, Julian.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. A few updates. Tomorrow, the Park Wellness and Recreation Commission will be meeting. This would be the final meeting for our vice chair, which is Sandy Richards. So this tomorrow will be our last meeting. Also, we held our last meeting for the community outreach for the Lane Park project. The design company will be providing a proposed design next month. We are going to host a pop-up vaccine clinic at Thomas Park Mall for 12 years. And
thank you, Diego.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council. As City Manager mentioned, we will be bringing back the proposed budget for adoption of the 21st. We'll also be following up with our pension obligation bonds that we introduced.
Thank you, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. One exciting, we make it official. We will have our national night out in October, and we're going to start planning. It should be pretty exciting. It's going to be hopefully a great community event. Then on a sadder note, I'd like to request to close in memory of two people. Los Angeles County Fire Department firefighter Corey Carlin, the 20-year veteran, was killed by a fellow worker on June 1st of this year. And then San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department Sergeant Dominic Vodka was killed in line of duty at the same time as a firefighter, or within 2 days, and he was a 17-year veteran. Thank you.
Thank you. And the only thing that I have is on June 15th, we're expecting there to be some relaxing of restrictions, COVID-19 restrictions. We don't know exactly what those will be yet, but I think how that impacts us from a council meeting standpoint is we will be planning for potentially having about a 50% occupancy in council chambers for in-person, which is a maximum of about 50 people. So there, we will be looking at potentially having some audience members starting July 21st. Again, that's assuming that those restrictions are lifted. But we'll still have to analyze those. You know, a lot of details that need to be filled in. So, other than that, I don't have anything further from staff.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to council comments. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I have the opportunity right now to, well, first, of course, thank you to staff for hearing the budget. However, I really do think it was inappropriate to present the enhancements in two different sheets as though they were somehow not the same consideration for council. I know that we're talking about $100,000 at the end, and it seemed like a very casual solution, but the fact is, overall, it's a $2 million decision, and those are the city's San Fernando residents' money. They approved Measure SF, which was about what $1.5 million, and that's what these add up to. So I think that it deserved more conversation what the enhancements were going to be of the full picture. I specifically requested during budget session that we articulate the tangible results that the community would feel from certain enhancements, and we never got staff to report back on what those were. And this was another opportunity to do it that was never fulfilled. And that was a request as a council member to have more information so that the community could understand what the tangible benefit was to these expenditures. So I'm just, I want to articulate that I hope we improve upon this process. Like, we're elected to do this, and I'm not here to be aggressive to anyone, but I do think it's really important that we consider that and do this better next time. Because the fact is, there are priorities presented by every council member that didn't make it, and they should have been considered with all of these. And I've said I come to these as staff. I get it, and I respect your recommendations, but I also expect you to present your recommendations and defend them, and allow the council to consider what's best for the community. With that said, I'd be remiss, right, if I didn't thank everyone for approving the 4th of July celebration next year. I think at the very least we can offer our community to illustrate the fact that they tax themselves and deserve more. That's visibly apparent to them. Of course, I always have to thank my partner for putting my family to bed while I'm here, and then just staff for not only your work on the budget, but the work we do every day to run the city.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, I want to thank Ms. Sandy Richards for her really great work on the Parks Commission. She's been such a great member of the community, not only as a commissioner, but as a pastor, and she will definitely be missed. And on that note, whoever might be listening, community, if interested in being a commissioner for Councilman Pacheco, please let me know, and we'll get you, involved in everything parks. Second, I definitely want to thank council for supporting the tree fund. I think it's not always so easy to articulate why we need trees in our community. And so I want to thank each and every one that supported it because, it's something that's just really important to the beautification of our city, to our air quality, to our quality of life in general. All in all, I also want to give some props to our mayor for conducting these budget sessions over the last few. That's some that I've been able to make and some that I haven't been able to make. And I want to give my gratitude and respect to her in conducting these sessions because sometimes they get heated and quorum and respect are sometimes not top of mind when we get passionate about items. And it's not always easy to preside over meetings that are so passionate. And so I want to also thank the rest of my council members for continuing to show that respect, integrity, and sincerity. At the end of the day, I would never question the fact that each one of us truly cares about San Fernando and really wants the best for our residents. How that manifests itself is different. Variety is the spice of life. But I'm just thankful to be a part of this family. I also want to thank them and the community for being patient with me as I, try to continue to stay involved and be aggressive for the issues that I'm passionate about for the community. So thank you and looking forward to the next one. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the compliment. It means a lot. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I too would like to thank Councilmember Sandy Richards for her commitment to the Parks and Rec Commissioner, Parks and Rec Commissioner, to the Parks and Rec Commission. So, she's did it for several years. How long was she on there?
Since I've been elected, so before that, I'm sure.
Yes, before that. And then also, we didn't discuss COVID, but I would like to ask if maybe the COVID at the rescue, the American Rescue, if that the ad hoc committee could consider some outreach with the residents and businesses on what their current needs are, because there's, I know that you're to the outreach and that would be something that, we knew what their needs were, about a year ago, how do they still need what assistance that they need, but let's see what it is now that things are changing and we're recovering. We can consider that. Also, thank you to staff for hanging in there with us during this budget process. We have one more meeting, we're not done, but thank you for all your help in answering our questions as they arise.
I'd like to also thank all of you for all your work. This is our fourth budget meeting, and it's really challenging when you have 5 council members that all are asking you for have different requests and different expectations. But I think considering the time frame with which we had to work and the product that you produced and how you incorporated our ideas was really great. It was very, very good. And I felt very appreciative of that. And so thank you to each of you. I really appreciate all your work. I would also like to Dad Jonathan and Mom Annabelle Pereira were excited about the birth of their first child. Unfortunately, at Annabelle's 2-week pregnancy, she did not fill the baby womb. The doctor informed them that he did not care about her. Baby Jonah is very loved by his parents, his uncle, my son, his grandparents, and it would have been their first grandchild. So, everyone was a member of Baby Jonah. my condolences to the parents of their first child. Everything was ready. It's just a heartbreak. And of course, we want to close memory of Fireman Tony Walker and Sheriff Dominic Walker. With that,